Take a look at these stones. They seem ordinary at first glance, just ancient slabs, ruins of some buildings. However, unlike many other archaeological finds, this one is among the most mysterious and unique. Here's why. These stones are the remains of a large temple complex called Puma Punku, located in Bolivia. Scientists aren't certain, but it's likely that Puma Punku was built by the Tiahuanaco Empire, which existed between 300 and 1000 CE, before the Inca Empire. There is no information suggesting that this civilization had advanced building technologies. Moreover, they might not have even had a writing system. Every stone was carved and polished with astonishing precision. They fit together perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle. The craft is so refined that not even a razor blade can pass between the stones. Quite impressive for people who lived around 1500 years ago. And these stones are heavy. The largest ones weighed around 130 tons. So, how did the builders transport such weight from one place to another? Scientists suggest that this civilization did not know about the invention of the wheel. So, how did they manage to build such a perfect engineering structure? Did Tiahuanaco have the knowledge and tools for stonework? Or did someone else build Puma Punku? There are several theories about this. Theory 1. There was some advanced civilization that came to South America, interacted with Tiahuanaco, built this engineering marvel, and then left. Theory 2. Some beings from another planet came to Earth, showed humans how to build perfect structures, and created Puma Punku. This theory is dubious. Another idea from this series suggests that Puma Punku was built by mythological creatures from the South American culture at that time. Theory 3, the most likely one. There is no mystery here. Tiahuanaco was indeed an advanced civilization with incredible building technologies. So, what do you think? Okay, we've seen some pretty rectangular stones used for building a temple. How about perfectly round stones for studying the starry sky? Or for some other purpose, it doesn't matter. So, welcome to Costa Rica. In the south of this country lies the so-called decaspheres. These are large, heavy, round stones created in the pre-Columbian era, around 600 CE. Now, each stone is made from a unique type of rock formed from cooled magma. In other words, someone waited for a volcanic eruption to end and for all the magma to cool, and then took all this material and carved these spheres from it. But how did they achieve such a perfect shape? Scientists suggest that people used small stones to grind and carve the cooled magma. Some specialists think that the stones were made for navigation. They could have indicated the way to certain places. Another theory claims that the deca squares were used for astronomy. No one knows for sure. We may never get the answer to this question because the people who knew the secret of the stones disappeared after the Spanish expansion. So, let's continue our journey. See these cobblestones? Archaeologists still don't know why they're arranged along a long stretch of desert crossing Jordan and Israel. These strange stones form a chain of lines 40 miles long and have been here since around 300 BCE. Because they were discovered by pilots during flights about 100 years ago, some call these stones kites. One of the more popular theories suggests that people placed these structures here to lure animals into a pit where they could be caught. Apparently, ancient hunters knew the behavior of local fauna well, and were sure the animals would somehow walk along these stones, ending up in an open area with a pit where hunters could easily do their work. Perfectly smooth rectangular and square stones, round stones, stone traps for animals. What's next? How about a stone canvas or stone painting? To see this ancient artifact, we'll travel to Glasgow, Scotland, where archaeologists unearthed a stone slab created about 5,000 years ago. It is called the Cochno stone. The slab measures 43 by 26 feet, about half a basketball court. And this entire area is filled with strange swirling patterns that scientists call cup and ring marks. But what do they mean? As usual, scientists don't know for sure, but one theory suggests that the inscriptions on the stone are somehow related to astronomical phenomena, such as lunar or solar eclipses. Maybe it was a star map, or maybe people just wanted to create a work of art. In any case, there is another interesting fact related to the cup and ring marks. Scientists have found similar drawings in other prehistoric sites around the world. Okay, let's step away from mysterious stones and look at some other archaeological mysteries. Here is the approximate order of civilization development starting from 8000 BCE, according to scientists. First, people settle in one place and build a city or settlement there. Then they engage in agriculture, and after that, they build temples. But in 1994, archaeologists said, no, the order might have been different. What if people first built temples to worship higher mythical beings, and only then built cities and engaged in agriculture? Let's go to Turkey, to the rural area of Gobekli Tepe, where in the mid-1990s, archaeologists discovered several stone pillars with carved animals on them. This ancient structure dates back to around the 10th millennium BCE. Now, this place is considered one of the oldest places of worship in the world. Most likely, it was built by semi-nomadic hunters who knew nothing about agriculture because it appeared in this region 5 centuries later. Now, scientists are wondering, is it true that such structures led to the settlement of the area? The answer to this question may help understand the mindset and development of humanity in many parts of our planet. So, would you like a scroll with the location of a treasure marked on it? You could say you already have one. Check it out yourself. Just Google the Copper Scroll Treasure. Download a high-resolution photo of the scroll and follow the instructions. Oops! The instructions are written in an incomprehensible language. Scientists have been trying to decipher this message since the scroll was discovered in 1952 in Qumran, and the answer is still not found. According to one theory, the scroll contains information about a large amount of silver and gold. But even if the treasure does not exist, this artifact is still quite interesting to study. It was created around 2,000 years ago, during the time when the Roman Empire ruled over the settlement of Qumran. Perhaps the local residents hid their valuables from the Roman legionnaires and left such a map for their descendants. When you approach this archaeological wonder, you won't notice anything. But if you rise into the air and look down at the ground, you'll see amazing patterns created by the people of the Nazca culture. This discovery is called the Nazca Lines. Pilots and passengers of commercial aircraft first noticed them in the 1920s and 30s during flights over Peru. These large drawings consist of geometric lines, complex images of animals, and whimsical figures. More than 2,000 years ago, people removed part of the surface soil of this land and created these patterns. But why? The Nazca Lines continue to captivate researchers and enthusiasts alike. Recent technological advancements, such as drone imagery and satellite mapping, have provided new insights into these enigmatic formations. Some researchers are now exploring the possibility that the lines serve multiple purposes, including communication with someone not from our world. And to some extent, this is true. Some scientists believe that the Nazca Lines were a ritual method for communicating with the deities of the Nazca civilization. Studying these archaeological wonders not only enriches our knowledge of the past, but also inspires us to appreciate the ingenuity and creativity of the human spirit. Now, we wouldn't call this island mystical unless there were tales of giants living here. The island of Gozo in Malta is the backdrop of an ancient legend. Malta is an island country located in the Mediterranean Sea, just south of Europe. It's a very strategically located archipelago. Throughout history, it was ruled by many different societies, such as the Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, and Carthaginians. One cold night, thousands of years ago, a farmer noticed the sky turn orange, then red, when he heard a loud thump. Although the ground seemed to be moving, this wasn't an earthquake. When he looked toward the woods, he saw a giant silhouette, taller than the trees. As he fearfully approached, he realized it was a woman, a giant woman. She introduced herself as Sunsuna. Unlike the terrible giants of many tales, Sunsuna didn't want to exterminate the human race. She was loving and caring. She told the farmer that she and her people could help protect their land from invaders. The locals were pretty interested in this offer. Since Malta is located in an important commercial route, it was constantly being invaded. The story says that Sunsuna settled in Malta, and sooner rather than later, she was moving things around. And when I say things, I mean monoliths. Sunsuna carried huge stones on her shoulder to build a magnificent temple called Ggantija, which means place of giants. She even did this while holding her half-giant, half-human kid on the other shoulder. Some say Sunsuna lived exclusively on beans and honey, although others replaced honey with water. The funniest bit here is that Malta is the 10th smallest country in the world, but it somehow managed to host giants. Hey, go figure. The temple looked like a giant game of Tetris, with some stones weighing as much as 20 elephants. Some of these monolithic rocks are so heavy, scholars guess it would take 50 men working together to lift just one stone. Now, as much as this is entertaining, humans never proved giants were real, so this story couldn't be true. There's a brief mention of a species of giants called the Nephilim in some ancient texts. The Nephilims would have been terrible giants that wreaked havoc on the earth and only survived until the Great Flood. But nobody ever found real proof of this species really existing on Earth, until this came along. The world of Maltese archaeology unearthed quite a few shocking things in the past years. One of them are known as the hypogeum skulls. Hypogeum is the Greek word for underground, and this incredible site was discovered in the first decade of the 20th century. Back then, Malta's National Museum director received an important phone call. Someone had accidentally dug some impressive bones and asked him to come check it out. The hypogeum looked like an underground city, filled with mazes and rooms that stretched along multiple floors. They were all made with similar limestones as the Maltese temples above ground. The hypogeum was filled with important relics and artifacts. Scientists quickly understood that the hypogeum was built as a type of final resting place for locals. So, along with skulls, they found a lot of bones and skeletons. One of these artifacts were skulls, but these weren't regular human skulls. Rather, they were of the elongated type. To make matters worse, these skulls were hidden from the public for years. People started to talk and created a bunch of theories behind it. The truth is that this discovery was a turning point for Maltese archaeology, although scientists didn't know what to do with it. Some wondered if these skulls were natural or manipulated, since they knew some cultures in the world used head binds to alter their skulls. Other scientists threw in the hypothesis of little gray people or even the legendary giants. Some say that the elongated skulls could have been sculptures that worshipped otherworldly deities. There was no way to confirm any of these theories, so the question remained: who were the builders of Malta's megalithic temples? Now let's take a look at what scientists know. The Maltese megalithic temples have been standing strong since 3500 BCE, which is even older than the pyramids of Egypt. The main dilemma here is that these temples were built even before we invented writing, yet they required advanced technological skills to exist. The Ggantija Temple seems too absurd to have been built by humans. The South Temple has a corridor with 4 oval rooms on the sides, looking like a big shamrock leaf. In one of these rooms, scientists found altars decorated with spiral patterns. It looked like an altar of some sort, indicating early Maltese people used them for ritualistic purposes. The North Temple is similar but smaller, with a very low entrance that makes people crouch down to get inside. You get it? You need to bow down to their deities in order to get into this sacred place. I mean, one can't help but wonder about the secret reasons these ancient builders had to build such a huge temple. I'm thinking they probably cast one of Daenerys' dragons to move the monoliths around. Yeah, I'm joking here. But hey, remember the entrance to King's Landing? Yup, the series used the Medina Gates in Malta as the exterior of King's Landing during Episode 3 of Season 1. Anyways, back to the giants. The ritualistic theory of the whole thing won a few points when archaeologists uncovered these mysterious figures. They're popularly known as fat ladies, These tiny statues have round bodies and faces that show how much they enjoyed life. They kinda look like a miniature Sunzana, the giantess we talked about. Scientists believe these were statues that celebrated well-being and prosperity. It does prove that the people of the time had advanced craftsmanship skills, and they were pretty intentional with their constructions and art manifestations. One of these statues is known as the Sleeping Lady. This Neolithic piece of art depicts the figure of a large woman lying on her side sleeping. After studying it deeper, scientists guessed this statue was meant to represent the Great Reaper. It was found in the hypogeum, which we now know was a huge resting place. This specific statue is different from all the other fat ladies, starting with the hair and the embroidered skirt. Then there's this statue. This is supposed to represent an 8-foot-tall woman and the rim of her skirt. She was discovered in the most unusual of ways. A farmer was trying to plow his field, but he kept hitting large blocks of stone. All the way back in 1915, the farmer called Malta's National Museum director and asked him to come check it out. Some think this is all the proof you need to confirm that Sunzana was real. Others aren't all that sure. But that's not all. The place where this giant statue was buried revealed one of Malta's most impressive archaeological sites, the Tarsian temples. The temples were made from limestone blocks. Some are 20 feet tall and weigh around 20 tons. Zamet, the museum director, kept digging and discovered multiple sites made of megalithic stones. All of them supposedly built by Stone Age farmers, all stranded on a remote island in the Mediterranean Sea thousands of years ago. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, look at these temples in Manidra. This is probably the world's earliest calendar. On the equinoxes, the sun passes directly through the main doorway, straight down the central axis. On the solstices, there are two superb variations. During the summer solstice, the rays fall on the edge of the megalith to the left of the doorway, and during the winter, the rays fall to the right side of the doorway. It's astronomical precision at its finest. And what about the structures in the Hall Tarsian that we've already talked about? This complex is the oldest one in all of Malta. It was built with the purpose of doing animal offerings to deities. Scientists confirm this by unearthing numerous animal bones buried in the soil. They also found a great collection of spirals, indicating that the locals also used this temple for ritualistic purposes. Overall, there are 7 megalithic temples in Malta, each more impressive than the other. Scholars keep on digging to see if they can uncover the truth, much like researchers do with the pyramids of Egypt, the lost Mayan cities in the Americas, and other sites. Hey, you've heard of Stonehenge? Of course you have. Big rocks mysteriously mounted in circles on a plain in England by, somebody. But what if England's Stonehenge is only a replica of another monument, and its builders just crossed the Atlantic and copied what someone had already done elsewhere? Well, it turns out researchers found another Stonehenge underneath the waters of Lake Michigan. This lake is a hotspot for woo-woo unexplained things. A bunch of disappearances, plane crashes, and now this. An ancient underwater monument that looks strangely enough like Stonehenge. We couldn't help ourselves and needed to dive deep into this story. A ring of massive stones, arranged in a way that felt all too familiar. They saw 2 circles, an outer one and an inner one, sitting 40 feet below the surface. But this wasn't just a random pile of rocks. These stones had been placed there, purposefully, by human hands. And by doing some further research, they discovered that they were staring at a structure that's over 9,000 years old. Think about it. This Stonehenge beneath Lake Michigan predates the pyramids. It predates Stonehenge itself by about 4,000 years. All of this information was enough to startle scientists at Northwestern Michigan University. But that was before they found this out. One of the stones had a carving, a faint but clear petroglyph of a mastodon. Mastodons kind of look like the ancestors to our modern-day elephants, but they have been extinct on planet Earth since 10,000 years ago. So, whoever built this underwater Stonehenge needed to be alive at the same time these creatures roamed our planet. This discovery raised many questions among scientists. I mean, why on earth would they go through all this trouble to lay rocks at the bottom of a lake? Well, first things first. Scientists believe that Lake Michigan had much less water back then than it does now. Second, it could have something to do with ancestral practices of First Nation people. There's one theory from a professor of the University of Michigan. He suggested that the stones formed a kind of prehistoric hunting trap. He believes that early hunters used the circular formation as a drive lane to herd large animals like the mastodons from the rock carvings we were just talking about. Once they got these huge animals into a tighter circle, they could be more easily hunted. But not everyone's convinced by this theory. Some believe the circle probably had a deeper spiritual purpose. According to local Native American tribes, like the Anishinaabe, stones are more than just rocks. They're living beings. They hold spiritual energy and represent a connection to the earth and all living creatures. An elder from the Anishinaabe community even suggested that these stones are sacred, placed there by their ancestors to honor the land and its creatures. Scientists are trying to study the stone formation in depth, like about 40 feet. But that's the problem, actually. The fact that it's underwater makes it super difficult, since they don't have the best technology. Traditional archaeological tools don't work as well when everything is submerged, but promising new technologies like stereophotogrammetry, which literally means making 3D models of a site, are helping scientists study the stone circle more closely. Still, research is slow and expensive, so it's hard to know when this mystery will come to a close. As we said, Lake Michigan is a hot spot for unexplained phenomena. Its lakebed is filled with shipwrecks, such as the Thomas Hume, a sturdy American schooner. It also collects debris from airplanes that have suddenly gone missing while flying the area, such as Northwest Airlines Flight 2501 that disappeared in the 1950s. Some people even call the area the Lake Michigan Triangle, suggesting paranormal activities like what happens in the Bermuda Triangle might be going on. The lake spans over 22,000 square miles, which means it's almost two-thirds the size of the country of Ireland. In 2024, scientists were able to access another one of Lake Michigan's mysteries, the wreck of the Margate schooner. This 130-foot-long sailing ship sank over 130 years ago. The discovery was announced just recently by the Wisconsin Underwater Archaeological Association, the WUAA, whose team found the shipwreck sitting 50 feet below the surface just off the shores of Algoma, Wisconsin. Built in 1872, the Margaret A. Muir was a three-masted schooner built to carry heavy cargo across the Great Lakes. Her final voyage started out as a routine trip. Loaded with bulk salt, the ship left Bay City, Michigan, heading for South Chicago, Illinois. But on September 30th, 1893, things took a bad turn. Just as the Muir approached the town of Anapi, now known as Algoma, a sudden storm hit. The ship began taking on water fast. The captain of the boat ordered his crew to abandon ship, and thankfully, they all made it to shore safely. For more than a century, the wreck sat undisturbed on the lakebed, its location a mystery. But thanks to a combination of historical research and high-resolution sonar, WUAA searchers finally found her in May of last year. The wreck is remarkably well preserved, with parts of the deck and gear still visible. Well, just a few lakes over to the left, researchers uncovered another impressive thing. At the bottom of Lake Mendota, near Madison, Wisconsin, researchers found 11 ancient canoes. They believe the oldest of the canoes dates all the way back to 2500 BCE. Now, if you don't get why that's important, it's because you're thinking with today's head. If in a classic Midwest highway you see a bunch of pickups, then back in the ancient days you see only canoes. They were the main mode of transportation for indigenous cultures. They were used to fish in deep waters, trade goods, and travel long distances. The reason why scientists were so excited with its discovery is because they had never found any proof of what canoes were being used for in this region back then. And to understand the local cultures that inhabited the area during this time period, they needed to have some information on that. This exciting discovery was announced by the Wisconsin Historical Society in May 2024. The first canoe, which they believe is around 1,200 years old, was pulled from the lake in 2021. Then a second one was dug up in 2022. And now divers have found at least 11 more canoes along what would have been an ancient shoreline, long since submerged. One theory is that these canoes were intentionally sunk to keep them from freezing or warping in winter. It's possible people stored them in the same spot for generations. Or maybe this is just a small part of a much bigger settlement. Historians do believe there could be an ancient village hidden under the water of the lake. Divers have already found stone tools, like net sinkers used for fishing, but the village itself hasn't been located yet. Truth is, while the Great Lakes often steal all the thunder, scientists point out that smaller lakes like Mendota have stories too. The Wisconsin Historical Society is working closely with Native nations to piece together more about the lake's history. You'll need to believe me when I say there is a third Stonehenge, all the way under the waters of Lake Constance, Switzerland. I mean, think of it like Stonehenge's cousin. Archaeologists began to discover this back in 2015, when they found a line of 170 man-made stone cairns under the lake. Scientists say this was most likely the work of several villages, and that the cairn site was probably used for some collective purpose because, well, the formations are huge. Some of them are several dozen feet wide, and they can build up to 6 feet. The most amazing discovery so far is that the site dates back to around 5,500 years ago. So around the time the original Stonehenge was being built. Some of the facts that link them together are their construction dates, as well as the distinct characteristic of stone monuments built in a circular format. Scientists don't know much about this site yet, but hey, I see a pattern manifested all over the world, don't you?
We all grew up believing that Stonehenge is the world's most ancient observatory, but now it has some serious competition for the title. Nabta Playa was built more than 2,000 miles away in southern Egypt and thousands of years before Stonehenge and even the pyramids of Giza. In 1973, a Bedouin guide stumbled upon a strange group of huge stone formations while crossing the Sahara Desert. He led American archaeologist Fred Wendorf to the site, located about 60 miles from the Nile. Wendorf's friend and colleague claims the team found the stones while stopping for a bathroom break in the desert. Either way, what they found changed history. At first, Wendorf thought the stone structures were just natural formations. But then it hit him. This area was once a lake, meaning no natural rocks should even be there. He kept coming back to the site for decades, and by the early 1990s, his team finally uncovered a circle of stones that seemed to line up with the stars in a way no one could explain. After 7 long years of trying to crack the mystery of the site, Wendorf reached out to an expert in archaeoastronomy. They study how ancient people used the stars. One evening, while the expert sat in the cool desert sand staring at the stones, he realized that they formed a pattern radiating outward from a massive burial mound. One by one, as they dug into the sediment, the buried megaliths started lining up like spokes on a wheel. The team had already used radiocarbon dating to test samples from fire hearths and tamarisk wood roofing found inside the stone circle. Nabta Playa had dozens of standing stones, all a few feet tall. Some of them lined up exactly with the sunrise on special days, and others matched up with bright stars in the sky. Inside the big circle, there were 6 special stones that may have been used for rituals or marking important times of the year. Around them, 29 standing stones might have worked like a simple calendar to help people know when it was time for something important, like the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. When the sun rose in just the right spot, it was a sign that the rainy season was coming. The stone circle once aligned with the brightest stars in the northern sky: Arcturus, Sirius, and Alpha Centauri. Some stones even pointed to the constellation Orion. By tracing Arcturus's movement across the sky, they figured out that it matched perfectly with the circle around 4800 BCE. That means it was the oldest astronomical site ever discovered. And the people of Nabta Playa may have been watching the stars thousands of years before telescopes were even invented. It looks like it had a huge meaning for people living and traveling through the desert. Over 10,000 years ago, the long, cold, and dry ice age that lasted for tens of thousands of years was finally fading away. Northern Africa got massive monsoons and rains that filled up seasonal lakes. So, parts of the desert turned into short-lived oases. For the nomadic people who roamed this harsh land, these summer rains were everything. Their entire way of life revolved around cattle. When archaeologists opened the central tomb at Nabta Playa, they dug up cattle bones and even a massive rock carved into the shape of a cow. The people who built it used the stars to guide them and find hidden watering holes like Nabta Playa, which likely held water for about 4 months a year, starting with the summer monsoons. But there was no North Star back then, so instead they navigated using bright stars and the way the sky seemed to spin in circles above them. When the lakes were full, the standing stones would be partly submerged, and from the western shore, you would see the reflection of the stars on the dark water. Nabta Playa is way less famous than Stonehenge, perhaps because its stones were buried and the famous site in England was open to visitors for thousands of years. Sadly, when Nabta Playa did become famous, some tourists ruined parts of it by moving stones around, which messed up the ancient star alignments. To protect it, the authorities moved everything to a museum where people can see the stones and the carved cow statue without damaging them. The Egyptian observatory isn't the only construction similar to Stonehenge. It has versions that were used for different purposes, from Germany and France to the US and the Andes in northern Peru. This last one is actually one of the oldest big structures ever built in this region. The circular plaza is made of 2 giant stone walls arranged in a ring. It was likely used for ceremonies and gatherings. Scientists have carbon dated it to be about 4,750 years old, which means it was built before the Great Pyramids of Egypt and Stonehenge. The plaza had 2 entrances and a special layer of clay, soil, gravel, and charcoal underneath. It was carefully planned and built. Archaeologists also found ceramic pieces, quartz crystals, and gemstones at the site, so it was definitely a special place. People visited it for centuries, but at some point it was sealed off, probably because of changing beliefs and traditions. The most recent discovery was the remains of a large timber circle roughly the same age and with parallels to Stonehenge, all the way up in Denmark. This open-air structure was likely part of a special area where prehistoric people from the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age gathered for rituals and ceremonies. The circle was made up of 45 giant wooden posts, forming a huge ring about 100 feet wide. The wood is gone now, but scientists believe tall timbers once stood in the holes and created an impressive wood henge. No one knows exactly what these circles were used for, but archaeologists have found animal bones and food remains at similar sites. So people probably used to gather there for feasts and rituals. In 2024, scientists found 2 ancient stone circles from the Neolithic period in Dartmoor National Park in England. Some archaeologists believe they might form a sacred ark. Many of Dartmoor's stone structures were built in a curved shape on the high ground in the center of the area. A long time ago, Dartmoor was covered in forests, so people may have used the high ground as important markers. One of the newly found circles fits inside this ark, but the other one is outside of it, to the north. This could have been an entrance point into the ark. There's also a raised bank of earth near the stones, which looks similar to other famous Neolithic sites, like the Ring of Brodgar in Scotland and Stonehenge itself. This means the people who built these circles may have visited Stonehenge or been inspired by it. Archaeologists in Oman found ancient stone monuments called tralith, which got the nickname Arabian Stonehenge. They were finished about 2,000 years ago, but no one knows for sure who built them or why. Scientists also found stone hand axes that are incredibly old, between 300,000 and 1.3 million years old, from the time when the first humans left Africa. At another site in central Oman, archaeologists discovered a Neolithic tomb from around 5000 to 4600 BCE. There are 2 chambers with the bones of dozens of people inside beneath a giant megalithic structure. Nearby, they also discovered rock carvings that were made by people who lived in the area. And then there is another Stonehenge look-alike, this time in Saudi Arabia, that was used as an apartment complex thousands of years ago. Archaeologists discovered a total of 345 stone circles by looking at aerial photos of a lava field. Each circle is between 13 to 26 feet and has at least one large standing stone in the middle. These structures still have remains of stone walls and doorways. Stone circles like Stonehenge are often linked to ceremonies and rituals, but scientists say that many early houses were actually built in round shapes, and rectangular homes only became common much later in history.
Hey, if you think Stonehenge is one of the oldest stone monuments ever, well, let me introduce you to Gobekli Tepe. Buckle up, we gotta travel to Turkey to meet this really old guy. Yeah, he's too old to travel. Jokes aside, Gobekli Tepe, an archaeological site located in southeastern Turkey that dates back to the Neolithic period around 10,000 BCE. It's considered to be one of the oldest and most significant archaeological discoveries in recent times. The site consists of a series of circular and rectangular structures made of stone pillars. Yeah, it does look like its younger brother Stonehenge. Some of those pillars are decorated with intricate carvings of animals and other symbols. Now, you maybe wonder, hey, why on earth did they make such a fascinating building? What was its purpose? Sorry, I got no answer for that. The purpose of the site is still unknown, but it is believed to have been a ceremonial center for the ancient people who lived in the area. The discovery of Gobekli Tepe has challenged long-held beliefs about the development of human civilization, as it suggests that complex societies may have emerged much earlier than previously thought. Okay, pack your stuff, our travel's just started. Next destination, Masada. It's an ancient fortress located in Israel on a plateau overlooking the Dead Sea. Hey, look at that view, spectacular, huh? It was built by King Herod the Great in the 1st century BCE, and it was very smartly built. Within the fortress, there were various facilities such as storehouses, barracks, a palace, and a set of cisterns capable of holding approximately 40,000 cubic meters of rainwater. People living there believed that the collected runoff from a single day's rainfall could provide sustenance for over 1,000 individuals for a period of 2 to 3 years. Access to the fortress was limited to 3 steep and winding paths leading up to fortified gates. Still, at one point, the fortress was occupied by people who had fled Jerusalem after the city was captured by the Romans. They held out against the invaders for several months, but eventually they were defeated. But these guys didn't surrender. The story of Masada has become a symbol of resistance and bravery. Today, Masada is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The next flight is going to be short. We're popping over to Egypt to see the Karnak Temple complex. It's a vast ancient Egyptian temple complex located in the city of Luxor, Egypt. It was built over a period of 2,000 years and covers an area of more than 200 acres. The complex is dedicated to the worship of the deity Amun-Roka. Wait a minute, that should be Amun-Ra, and it was one of the most important religious centers in ancient Egypt. The Karnak Temple consists of several temples, chapels, and other buildings, including the Great Temple of Amun, the Temple of Khonsu, and the Temple of Ptah. Ptah! The Great Temple of Amun is the largest and most impressive temple in the complex, with massive columns, statues, and other decorations. One of the most famous features of the Karnak Temple complex is the Avenue of Sphinxes, which is a long avenue lined with Sphinx statues that leads from the entrance of the complex to the Great Temple of Amun. Another notable feature is the Hypostyle Hall, which is a massive hall with 134 columns that are over 70 feet high. The Karnak Temple complex is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's considered one of the most important archaeological sites in Egypt and provides a fascinating glimpse into the religion and culture of ancient Egypt. Hey, we can't hop on the next flight and leave Egypt until we see the Pyramid of Djoser. It has another name, by the way. It's also known as the Step Pyramid. This ancient Egyptian site is located in Saqqara. It was built during the 27th century BCE for the pharaoh Djoser by his architect Imhotep, who is considered one of the most important figures in Egyptian history. People believe this pyramid is the first monumental structure built entirely of stone and is an important example of early Egyptian architecture. The pyramid originally stood at 203 feet tall and was surrounded by a complex of buildings and courtyards. It was constructed in 6 layers, each smaller than the one below it, giving it the distinctive step-like appearance. The pyramid was used as a burial place for Pharaoh Djoser and was surrounded by a vast necropolis that contained the tombs of many other important officials. The Grateful Dead? The Pyramid of Djoser has several renovations and additions over the centuries, including the addition of a limestone casing that covered the original step structure. However, much of the pyramid was destroyed over time, and today only the central core remains. Despite this, it remains an important archaeological site and a popular tourist attraction in Egypt. Alrighty, we're ready to move on. There's one more pretty recent discovery we gotta see today. The Tower of Jericho was only discovered during excavations in the 1950s and 60s. It's an ancient stone tower located in the city of Jericho in the West Bank. Just like Gobekli Tepe, this one is believed to be one of the oldest stone structures in the world, dating back to approximately 8000 BCE. The tower stands at over 28 feet tall. It's made up of 2 main sections, an inner tower and an outer tower, which are connected by a series of stairs. The purpose of the Tower of Jericho is not entirely clear, but it is believed to have served as a defensive structure or a watchtower. It may have also had religious significance, as it was located near a sacred spring. The Tower of Jericho is a significant archaeological site and has provided valuable insights into the early history of human civilization. It's open to visitors and is a popular destination for tourists interested in ancient history. Now, this ancient site even got attention from Netflix, and they made a movie where the action takes place in Mohenjo-daro. This site was a major center of the Indus Valley civilization in present-day Pakistan. Mohenjo-daro was one of the largest cities of the ancient world, with a population estimated to have been around 40,000 in its peak. Trust me, that must have been a crazy megalopolis back then. The city was notable for its advanced urban planning, with sophisticated drainage and sanitation systems, and its impressive architecture, including the Great Bath and the Granary. Mohenjo-daro was abandoned around 1900 BCE, and its ruins were only rediscovered in the 1920s. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and an important archaeological site for the study of ancient South Asian civilization. We're heading to a teeny-tiny country that has quite an impressive history. Welcome to Malta. The Ggantija Temples are a Neolithic site located on the Mediterranean island of Gozo. They're probably one of the oldest freestanding structures in the world, dating back to around 3600 to 3200 BCE. The temples consist of 2 megalithic structures, each with multiple rooms and altars. The name Ggantija means giant tower in Maltese, as people believe that only giants could have built such massive structures. The temples are believed to have been used for religious purposes and are considered to be an important example of prehistoric architecture. They were added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1980. Well, you must be pretty tired, but there's one more place we gotta visit today. Our plane is already landing in Armenia, and we're here to see the Temple of Garni. Look, this one is well preserved. This temple dates back to the 1st century CE. It was built by King Tiridates I as a dedication to the sun deity Mir. Sadly, the temple was destroyed in the 17th century during an earthquake, which is quite a common thing for this area, but it was later reconstructed in the 20th century. Today, it's a popular tourist attraction and is also listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So how come the world is still talking about a statue that only existed for a mere 54 years over 2,000 years ago? What made this impressive ancient construction so remarkable that we're still discussing it? I'm talking about the Colossus of Rhodes, of course. It's considered to be one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, along with the Great Pyramid of Giza or the Gardens of Babylon. There are a lot of mysteries surrounding this ancient statue, but let's look at some of the facts first, shall we? What we do know is that the local Rhodians decided to start a massive project once a Macedonian siege over their island was over. In other words, it was their way of honoring the higher powers for their victory. Using a lot of material left behind by the Macedonians, they started the construction of the Colossus, which is estimated to have taken about 12 years. Most contemporary descriptions of the sculpture agree that it stood about 105 feet tall. Now, just to compare, that's about the size of the Statue of Liberty today, which is 151 feet tall. It may not seem like a lot. I mean, Lady Liberty is currently ranked as the 52nd tallest statue in the world. The champion here would be the Statue of Unity in India, standing proud at an astonishing 597 feet. But for ancient times, that was quite an accomplishment. But is the similar height the only connection between the Colossus of Rhodes and the Statue of Liberty? Not really. We do know that they both also refer to Lady Liberty as the modern Colossus, since both statues were constructed as a symbol of liberation. There's even a plaque placed inside the pedestal of the New York statue, inscribed with the first verse of the sonnet, "The New Colossus," not like the brazen giant of Greek fame. To build this massive Colossus statue, they sure needed a lot of bronze. Some ancient records even recount that the construction required 27,000 to 29,000 pounds of bronze. Even for modern times, this is a lot, but back then, they even called it an operation that involved the bronze industry of the entire world. The man tasked with bringing the statue to life was Charles of Lindos, a local Greek sculptor. The whole construction took place from 294 to 282 BCE, but unfortunately, Charles never got to see the end result. We don't know for sure why that happened, but some records claim constructing the Colossus of Rhodes may have led him to complete bankruptcy, since he failed to accurately estimate the cost for the massive statue. Anyway, we still don't know for sure how it was possible to build a statue this big back in those days. They had none of the equipment we have today, like excavators or elevators. Some old records said that they had to invent a completely new, custom method to build it. It all happened on the location, put together piece by piece. They supposedly split the statue into many different sections, and the first one to be constructed was the feet. Once each section was done, huge mounds of earth were placed around it, so they could continue working on the next section above. However, these records were made more than 100 years after the Colossus was finished, so there's little we can say about the accuracy of this information. In all those 12 years, the local Greeks worked around the clock to build the Colossus of Rhodes. They started with a white marble base that they placed at the statue's feet. They then continued with some sort of an iron skeleton, to which they attached the bronze plates. Why did they choose bronze, though? Well, that was more for practical reasons, since bronze is stronger than iron and it can also sustain extreme weather conditions. More so, if you think about it, the statue was located pretty close to the sea, so the air surrounding it would have been pretty salty. That's why they needed to make it out of quite sturdy material. And what about the location? Well, that's something that has been up for debate for a long time. Researchers initially believed that the statue stood with each leg on either side of the Mandrake Harbor, one of many in the city of Rhodes, basically straddling its entrance. As imposing as that may sound, it was likely not the case. First of all, that would have meant the harbor would have to have been closed for the whole duration of the construction, which doesn't seem to match all the other records. More so, after the statue had fallen, it would have probably blocked the entirety of the harbor, which again doesn't seem to be mentioned anywhere. Most recent depictions say that it most likely stood either on the eastern side of the Mandrake Harbor or maybe even further inland. So, what happened to this impressive structure? Is there really nothing left of it to this day? And why did it survive for only 54 years, since it took so long to build and it was so important for locals? Well, as admired and valued as it was to the Greeks, an earthquake took the Colossus of Rhodes away from them. The story goes that because of the movement of the earth beneath it, the statue snapped at its knees and was completely laid on the ground. Nonetheless, the statue still continued to be admired for centuries. The Rhodians refused to rebuild it as they considered it a sign and did not dare intervene with destiny. By the middle of the 7th century, they had taken away what was left of the statue completely. Legend says it took about 900 camels to carry all the bronze away from the location. And what about the looks of the statue? This is also one aspect that is still shrouded in mystery. Even though it was a symbol of the locals' pride in maintaining their independence, they did not use the depiction of the statue for any of the coins they made, even though that was kind of customary. Other art historians do think, however, that the Colossus was similar to other depictions of the same mythological creature, a male figure that had rays of light rising from its head. The position of its hands is also still up for debate. Some say it might have even been holding a torch. We don't know if his hands were pointed straight down or whether the right arm was raised, like in similar representations in Greek mythology. The original might not be here for us to admire anymore, but there are some plans out there to rebuild it. A group of European architects intends to build a 21st century version of the ancient statue. This new construction is planned to stretch 500 feet tall. It should serve as a cultural center combined with a lighthouse. To make sure it won't have the same destiny as its ancient ancestor, these designers intend to use a lot of technology available today. Firstly, they plan to cover the whole exterior of the modern Colossus with solar panels so that the enormous building has enough electricity. They also intend to use modern resources to make sure earthquakes and wind forces won't affect the massive structure yet again. To do that, they plan to build the statue as a tripod structure, made from its 2 legs and a third pillar of support, constructed from the sash draped over the statue's arm and touching the ground. They also plan to place heavy steel support around the base for counterbalance. They even thought of a suspension system that would permit the statue to rock back and forth, making it a bit more flexible and able to resist all the various weather conditions. The manufacturer's suggested retail price on this project is quite high though, estimated at around $283 million. Supporters of the modern Colossus are optimistic as they are certain they can raise that impressive amount of cash through crowdfunding and private investments.
Ever since Plato wrote about the allegory of Atlantis, humanity has been fascinated with the possibility of the discovery of a thriving underwater civilization. Fancy joining me on a trip to a few historic underwater sites? Let's see what we can find out about ancient civilizations. The first one on our list is what is being called the underwater Stonehenge. Scientists have recently discovered a mysterious pile of cairns that stretch for miles under the shimmering waters of Lake Constance at the borders of Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. Archaeologists began to explore the site back in 2015, and they haven't been able to understand yet what it was actually used for. What they do know is that there is a 12-mile line of 170 human-made stone cairns under Lake Constance. Scientists say this was most likely the result of a combined work of several villages. The cairn site was probably used for some collective purpose. The formations are huge. Some of them are several dozen feet wide. The most amazing discovery so far is that the site dates back to around 5,500 years ago. Now, what were we humans doing back then? We were living in the prime years of the so-called Stone Age. We were beginning to make artifacts from stone and use them to hunt and eat. Can you imagine what a knife and fork might have looked like back in those days? It's no coincidence that scientists call this site the underwater Stonehenge, though. Both sites are believed to have been built around the same period of time. You see, Stonehenge dates back to around 3100 BCE. Both sites carry the distinct characteristic of stone monuments built in a circle. Not to mention the fact that scientists also haven't figured out why on earth our early ancestors would feel the need to build a monument such as Stonehenge. Well, the mystery of Lake Constance hasn't been solved yet. Who were the Neolithic people from this area? And for what purpose did they go through such an amount of work and effort to build this huge stone site? Next, we're taking you on a tour of the Ryukyu Islands just off the coast of Japan. You're diving deep down to an archaeological site. But I should warn you, the waters of the Pacific Ocean are far from smooth. It doesn't take long before you see a huge structure, thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, it looks like Machu Picchu's ruins located across the globe in Peru. As you approach the site, you slowly figure out its forms. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or a castle. Could this be a sign of human activity? What you've just seen is known today as the Yonaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 soccer fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expanse of terraces. Explorers and scientists believe that Yonaguni might be 10,000 years old. But whether it's a human-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yonaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived to the bottom of the ocean to explore the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. On the monument's surface, there is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There's also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And, according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age is around 10,000 years. However, not all scientists support this theory. For many, Yonaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe it's not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation in Northern Ireland, known as the Giant's Causeway. The basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they're actually the result of volcanic activity in the region. Now, you're flying to the coast of Greece, 4 hours away from Athens. More specifically, you're in the Peloponnese Peninsula. You dust off an old snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on a seabed. 13 feet below the surface, outlines of familiar objects start to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges in front of your eyes. Are you wondering how water could have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. This is Pavlopetri, an ancient city you've probably heard about for the first time. It was discovered by Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer, when he was on vacation in Greece. He had heard rumors about Pavlopetri's existence and indeed found several artifacts on the seafloor. He went back to the area a year later with the team. They found a site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A kernstone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras indicate that this settlement dates back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have existed for over 2,400 years. Today, Pavlopetri is considered the oldest submerged town ever discovered, and what's impressive is that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has been turned into an archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists only below the surface, but in 1692 it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time and an important trade city that attracted people from all over the region. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they had probably expected. The city woke up shaking. People were thrown out of their beds by the power of a massive earthquake, ranking 7.5 on a Richter scale. One survivor said he had seen Earth opening up and swallowing the whole town. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built on sand. The ground swallowed buildings, roads, you name it. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared under the water. Amazingly, most of its 17th century remains are still in good condition under 40 feet of water. Archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can also see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Of course, I saved the best for last: India. Just off its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambay is located in the Gulf with a similar name. It remained undiscovered until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology made a routine water assessment. With the help of sonar technology, which sends a wave sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains date to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site, but if they truly are, then the lost city of Cambay might be the oldest civilization in the world.
Hundreds of thousands of tourists try to push it back up for cool photos. But can anyone really save the Leaning Tower of Pisa from falling over? The tower is one of the most famous examples of medieval architecture and a part of a complex called Pisa's Field of Miracles. In the 12th century, when the construction began, it was pretty unusual for a bell tower to stand away from a cathedral. But that is, of course, not the most unique feature of the tower. No one actually planned for it to be leaning on one side, but things happen, you know. It started tilting southward shortly after the beginning of construction because of the soft ground under its foundations. That soil couldn't handle the weight of the heavy white marble and started to go down. The builders decided to get creative and add each next floor at an angle to fix the tilt, but it didn't help. Once 3 of the 8 floors were finished, the tilt was so obviously getting worse that they had to halt the process to solve the problem. Because of a major conflict between Pisa and the city-state of Genova, the construction stopped for around 100 years. This time was enough for the soil to get in a better condition. A new architect took charge of the process, and in 1372, the tower was ready, tilted at 1.6 degrees. A popular legend says that Galileo Galilei, a famous Italian astronomer and physicist, dropped 2 different weights from the tower to prove that lighter and heavier objects fall at the same speed. If that legend is true, he would have done it when the tower was tilted at about 3 degrees. Almost 3 centuries later, an architect working on the tower wanted to show the world the beautiful carvings on its base, hoping to increase its value. Sadly, it made the construction tilt like never before. Oops. But even despite all this, Pisa's main symbol managed to survive at least 4 massive earthquakes. It turned out that the moldable soil prevented the tower from resonating with earthquake ground motion. In the middle of the 20th century, when the tower was already leaning at 5.5 degrees, Italian officials decided to invite experts to save it from completely falling over. Ideas on how to preserve the ancient monument arrived from all across the world, and they created a special international committee. They came up with an idea to extract soil from beneath the tower's northern foundation to put it back in an upright position. The team ran computer simulations and decided to bring the plan to life before it was too late. Workers wrapped steel bands around the first level of the tower to protect the stone. They put an impressive amount of lead weights on the northern side of the tower and connected it to cables set deep underground. Then they started drilling and removing the soil step by step. This method worked and helped to pull the tower against the direction of the tilt. The team had to repeat the process over several years at 41 different locations around the tower. Talk about perseverance. In May 2008, the tower finished straightening and finally stood still. It lost a total of 19 inches of its tilt. Not bad at all. Engineers believe it will stand strong for at least another 200 years. And with the technology of the future, it should be easy to fix it again and let it stand for another 800 years. Or who knows, maybe robots will figure out how to preserve it forever. So, you have no reason to worry about the Leaning Tower of Pisa. But you might get concerned about the future of some other leaning towers around the world. The bell tower of Syracuse, Germany, held the official title of the world's furthest leaning church tower for years. It was built of granite more than 625 years ago on marshy soil. The foundation was made of oak tree trunks. The water in the ground actually helped to preserve it. When it was drained in the 19th century, the wood deteriorated and the tower started tilting. They had to close it to reinforce the tower, and it has been functioning as a church since it became safe again. In the summer of 2022, another German tower beat the record of the bell tower of Syracuse. A special commission measured the tilt of the Leaning Tower of Gau-Weinheim, and it turned out to be 5.42 degrees. It's a medieval fortified tower, and its bell still rings 3 times a day. The most famous clock tower in the world, London's Big Ben, is also leaning on one side. By the way, Big Ben is actually the name of the bell inside the tower, which was renamed the Elizabeth Tower in 2012. Anyway, the tower is now leaning about 1/4 of a degree to the northwest. It sounds like nothing, but in the long term, it could become unstable. Experts don't know what's causing the tilt. There's a theory that says that the London clay on which Big Ben stands is drying out. The keeper of the great clock mentioned it could be between 4,000 and 10,000 years until the tilt becomes a serious problem. I can wait. The Belfry Tower of Bruges, another famous construction, is a real survivor. Lightning struck it at the end of the 15th century, burning the spire to ashes and ruining the bells. The new spire was also devoured by flames 2.5 centuries later. So what you see today is the result of several rebuildings. The tower now has 47 bells. They used to play an important role in the life of the city. The bells would ring to announce fire alarm, work hours, and major events. If the tilt of 34 inches isn't disturbing you, you can climb the tower to enjoy the views from the top. And if you think only constructions from the Middle Ages can tilt when no one asked them to, meet San Francisco's Millennium Tower. This skyscraper is the tallest residential building in the city. It offers luxurious apartments and tilts more than 2 feet north and west. It has no plans to stop leaning so far and keeps going at a speed of 3 inches a year because it's sinking into the ground. And if no one manages to solve the problem, it could reach a tilt of 40 inches. If it goes any further on the side, the elevators and plumbing might not function anymore. All this is most likely the result of a construction mistake. The proposed solution now is to install 18 steel pipes down to bedrock deep underneath the tower to halt and probably even reverse some of the tilting. Some buildings are made tilted on purpose. The Capitol Gate Tower is one of the architectural gems of Abu Dhabi, UAE. This beauty has an incline of 18 degrees, which helped it win the title of the farthest leading building made by humans. The tower has 35 floors and symbolizes the blending of sea and desert. The main construction is supposed to look like a spiral of sand, and the curved canopy is a splash of water. Because of this unique shape of the tower, each floor and even each room inside has a one-of-a-kind shape and size. The tallest leaning tower, made tilted on purpose, is the Montreal Olympic Stadium Tower in Canada. It's half as tall as the Eiffel Tower and tilts at a whopping 45 degrees. It looks quite unsafe, but actually supports most of the weight of the roof of the main building, thanks to its design. The tower was supposed to be open for the 1976 Olympic Games, but building it took longer than planned. The top 3 floors of the tower host an observatory with panoramic views of up to 50 miles in every direction. A funicular can take you up there to enjoy the scenery, but you gotta be prepared for a 2-minute ride. Hey, don't worry, you can lean on me. The county of Kent, England, has a cultural treasure called the Margate Shell Grotto. This subterranean passageway is lined with about 4.5 million seashells, composing an intricate mosaic. The gorgeous landmark was stumbled upon by accident in the 1800s, and it's still engulfed in mystery to this day. That's because no one knows who built it or why. Experts can't even figure out how it was built, since they'd need to collect samples from the walls and the removed parts would be irreplaceable. A brief analysis of the substance beneath these shells points to some sort of fish-based concoction. Some believe these walls were designed by some sort of evolved ancient civilization. Others describe the Margate Shell Grotto as belonging to either Egyptian, Roman, Indian, or Phoenician architecture. One other potential explanation is that the masterpiece was a personal project of an eccentric Victorian aristocrat. Now, the Roman Colosseum used to be nearly twice as large as it is today. However, it did not survive in its full form throughout the ages. Let's look at some of the history surrounding the Colosseum to piece the story together and how it managed to be scattered around town. The construction of this building began in 70 CE under Emperor Vespasian. Is that where Vespa comes from? Ever since it first opened, it was home to lots of activities and shows, featuring the mighty gladiators and a large array of exotic animals. And we'll leave it there. Its architectural glory started to dim down in 217, when a fire struck the upper parapets and much of the building's interiors. It took a whole century to finish the repairs for the damages, but the first form of the Colosseum would be gone forever. The downfall continued with an earthquake that affected southern Italy in 443. At this point, a big part of the Colosseum's outer ring was damaged. After the Siege of Rome, which happened in 472, locals met hardship, so a lot of them had to rely on selling pieces of limestone from the ancient Colosseum. Its most devastating blow came from another earthquake, which happened in 1349. This is when the south side of the building completely collapsed. That's when it started to look more like the building we see today in the Italian capital. However, the pieces of stone that were shaken off from the Colosseum were used to rebuild some other famous landmarks in Rome. So, if you just think about it, the missing part of the Colosseum isn't missing at all. It's just been repurposed, scattered around the city. Official efforts to preserve the Colosseum started around the 17th century and have been developing ever since, culminating with the massive Roman building being named one of the 7 wonders of the world in the 21st century. Now, the Colosseum may be the most famous, but it's certainly not the only ancient amphitheater worth mentioning. Continuing the list is the Amphitheater of El Jem, which dates to around 238. You'll find it in the small Tunisian town of El Jem. History connoisseurs may know El Jem as one of the best preserved Roman stone ruins in the world. It stands at about 100 feet tall and has the capacity to host around 35,000 people. No list of important ancient sites is complete without mentioning the glorious city of Pompeii in Italy. A massive eruption of the Vesuvius volcano covered the entire city in a considerable layer of volcanic ash. Luckily for us, though, what was left underneath that layer was very well preserved, and it's been studied ever since its discovery in the 1800s. Pompeii was originally inhabited by the Oscan tribe long ago, but it was then transformed into a colony during the ages of the Roman Empire. It has some of the best preserved villas, baths, shops, and even residential buildings. Tourists can also walk across paved streets and see artworks like sculptures, mosaics, and wall paintings. Now, when visiting Peru, most people head over to Machu Picchu. But let me tell you a little secret. Machu Picchu is not that ancient, as it's estimated to have been built in the 15th century CE. If you're looking for something a bit older, the ruins of Caro, also situated in Peru, might be a better choice, as it's one of Southern America's oldest urban areas. No sign of brutality was ever found here in this area, so archaeologists suggested that this place was home to a peaceful society. It's believed they used commerce to make ends meet, and they also enjoyed music. That's because one of the most significant discoveries made here at this site was the impressive collection of musical instruments, which featured 37 cornetos made of animal bones, like deer and llama. Another 33 flutes were found here, which were estimated to date as far back as 2170 BCE. The ruins of the ancient city of Pella in Jordan date back to over 6,000 years ago. They are also a notable example of advanced societies that have been long gone, as it features ancient theaters, Roman baths, and a fountain house. What makes this location even more important is the fact that archaeologists believed it has been populated ever since the Stone Age. The ancient theater of Fourvière is a secluded gem hidden in the French city of Lyon. Archaeological data estimates it was built over 2,000 years ago, and it offers a gorgeous view of the city. Able to seat about 10,000 people, this ancient theater is home to the famous Nuit des Fourvières, a music festival. Now, back in Greek and Roman times, it was called Heliopolis, or the City of Sun. These days, Baalbek features a temple complex that's home to 2 of the biggest Roman temple ruins, the temples of Bacchus and that of Jupiter. Should you want to visit it, you'll need to head over to eastern Lebanon, where these temples are wonderfully preserved to this day. We do know they date back to about the 2nd or 3rd century. The Ellora Caves in India are said to date back as far as 600 CE, and they stretch across more than a mile. Located in the state of Maharashtra, here's where you can visit a rare array of 34 temples, which were intricately carved out of the mountainside. They're filled with delicate works of art like paintings and sculptures. The so-called Cradle of Humankind is home to the oldest record of humankind's history. It's found near Johannesburg in South Africa and features some of the oldest hominin fossils ever discovered. Here you can find roughly 40% of the world's human ancestor fossils. One interesting fossil is that of an Australopithecus africanus called Mrs. Please, who's estimated to have lived around 2.5 million years ago. Fun fact, they even let you have a wedding here. Another temple complex that goes back to the 10th century is Kol Kir, and this one is in the jungles of Cambodia. The journey to reach this ancient site is not easy, and most tourists prefer to use tuk-tuks, a 3-wheeled taxi to get there. The most important monument here at Kol Kir is named Prasat Tham. Only a limited number of tourists are allowed to climb the staircase to the top to reduce their exposure to damaging elements. but the views are worth it if you don't have a fear of heights. You'll see about 40 inscriptions that go as far back as 932. A lot of monuments from the complex aren't open to visitors, since they are still hidden in the forest and the area is not safe. It's hard to imagine that this site used to be the location for the biggest trading center in the world back in the 3rd century. However, since the ruins of Volubilis are some of the best preserved in the world, they can still paint us a pretty accurate picture. With its majestic House of Commons and the triumphal Arch of Caracalla, Volubilis was the farthest city of the Roman Empire and a key location for the Kingdom of Mauritania. It would have been in an even better location if it weren't for an earthquake that happened in the 18th century. If you ever want to check it out, be sure to head to Morocco's Fez Meknes region.
Back in the 12th and 13th centuries, Bologna used to look like modern-day Manhattan. No one knows exactly how many towers resembling skyscrapers it used to have, but the most likely number is at least 100. The tallest of them was around the same height as Big Ben. When the towers were built, Bologna was one of the largest cities in Europe. Construction projects were massive and ambitious. Someone built cathedrals and town halls, and the richest noble families also erected towers, possibly as a symbol of status and wealth. There was no place in the city center to build grand castles, so they had to go up with the construction. They didn't actually live in those towers, but in smaller structures next to them. The towers served for defensive purposes. It took between 3 and 10 years of work to build one tower, and it was a really tedious process. Each of them had a steady foundation deep underground and a base made of big blocks of selenite stone. The rest of the tower was becoming thinner and lighter the higher it went. In the 13th century, they demolished many of the towers, and others just collapsed by themselves. Some of them were later reused as city towers, shops, or residential buildings. Now you can see only 22 towers still standing in the center of Bologna. 2 of them have become the unofficial symbol of the city, mentioned in every guidebook. Another historical surprise coming from Italy is that gladiators weren't only male. Gladiatrix were rare, but they did exist. There's evidence that several women took part in Rome's public games. In ancient texts, these women were often called ludia, or mulieres, but not ladies. Some scholars think it means that it was mostly lower-class women in the arena. The term gladiatrix wasn't used in ancient times. It was first coined in the 1800s. Women who chose to become gladiators seemed to do so for independence, fame, financial rewards, and probably debt remission. They were most likely honored like male gladiators. All this was a bit tricky to accept in Roman society at that time, and women's roles in it. At the beginning of the current era, the Roman Senate passed a law prohibiting free-born women under 20 from taking part in arena games. Emperor Septimus Severus banned all women from the arena in the year 200 of the current era. He was probably afraid that women might want to compete in the Olympic Games. It would seriously mess up the existing social order. Pineapples were once the equivalent of designer bags and watches today, a symbol of wealth and status in Britain. You can still see them at the top of the western towers of St. Paul's Cathedral, one of the most famous landmarks of London. Explorers who came back from the Americas described pineapples with so much enthusiasm that everyone was dreaming about trying the king of fruits, as it was called. Pineapples need very high temperatures and years to mature. And despite the cold and rainy climate of England and Scotland, you could see pineapples growing in any wealthy country house garden by the end of the 18th century. They even installed special greenhouses called pineries with heating systems. A single pineapple was worth up to 80 pounds, which is about $15,000 today. Of course, people would hardly eat this expensive beauty, but send it as a gift or display on a dining table until it would rot. Folks who couldn't afford to buy a pineapple would sometimes rent one to show off wealth at a party. The king of fruits became a part of various designs and tableware for the rich. Stone pineapples on gateposts and the pineapple atop the Wimbledon trophy are living memories of that time. Around 1820, there were so many pineapples imported from abroad that they started losing their luxury status. 100 million years ago, there were giant crocodiles living in the Sahara Desert. In the 1990s, paleontologists found fossilized skeletons of primitive crocodiles, including the so-called supercroc. They discovered several partial skeletons from 110 million years ago. This prehistoric giant with a head as large as an adult human was about 40 feet long. That's about 2 times as tall as a giraffe. The croc thrived both in water and on land as part of a diverse ecosystem of ancient North Africa. The expeditions to the Sahara found a whole lost world of ancient crocodiles, with some species that resembled modern animals. One of them was the dog croc. With its tall legs and keen sense of smell, it moved through the surroundings much like a dog. Another fascinating find was the duck croc, a 3-foot-long crocodile with duck-billed platypus-like features. It was adapted for life on land rather than water. And then there was also the rat croc, a small 2-foot-long crocodile. This species had front teeth, perfect for digging up insects. These prehistoric creatures were more agile, active, and probably more intelligent than today's crocs, who are passive hunters. If noise-canceling headphones had been invented in the 19th century, they would have come in really handy. On the 27th of August 1883, the island of Krakatoa in Indonesia experienced a catastrophic eruption. It produced what is believed to be the loudest sound ever recorded. As Krakatoa collapsed, it triggered tsunamis with waves reaching 151 feet that traveled as far as South Africa. Krakatoa was an uninhabited volcanic island that hadn't erupted for 2 centuries before this terrible day. The eruption took the lives of over 30,000 people and caused extreme fluctuations in air pressure, perceived as sound. A barometer at a gasworks 100 miles from Krakatoa recorded 172 decibels. An average human can withstand up to 130 decibels of sound without getting in serious trouble. This intense pressure ruptured the eardrums of sailors on the British ship Norham Castle, which was 40 miles away from Krakatoa. The sound wave from it circled the globe, and people could still hear it even 3,000 miles away, where it resembled cannon fire. The late 1800s were a golden era for grand mustaches. But there was one problem. You couldn't enjoy a cup of tea with this kind of facial hairstyle. The heat from the tea would melt mustache wax and make the ends droop. Fine gentlemen had to struggle because of it until the invention of the mustache cup. Harvey Adams, a British potter, likely invented the mustache cup in the 1870s. He patented a butterfly-shaped ledge inside the cup with a hole to sip through. Thanks to it, the mustache didn't get wet. These cups quickly became a hit, first in the UK and then across Europe. In the United States, they were sold at stores like Sears and Marshall Field's, now part of Macy's. Mustache cups came in various shapes and sizes. Some, like farmers' cups, could hold up to a pint of tea. Others were smaller porcelain pieces shaped like conch shells or decorated with the owner's name. They often came with matching saucers. Lord Byron, one of the greatest British poets, kept numerous dogs and cats and a whole bunch of exotic animals. There was a monkey, a crocodile, a fox, peacocks, a bear, and several badgers. When Byron attended Trinity College, Cambridge, college rules prohibited keeping dogs on the grounds. He got really angry and decided to go around the rules. Byron brought a tame bear as his pet. The college authorities argued with him, but since the statutes did not specifically mention bears, they had no legal grounds to remove either the bear or its owner. Byron walked the bear on a chain, talked to it, and even considered applying for the bear to become a student at the college. We still don't know how and where Byron got the bear, but when he left Cambridge, he took the bear with him to his estate in London.
What if I told you you just won a round-the-world trip to visit the planet's most famous landmarks? Nice, right? But there's a catch. You might be visiting them for the last time in your life. That's because these landmarks are threatened to disappear during your lifetime. Yikes! Ah, Paris, the city of love. For our modern eyes, it's hard to imagine the city without its most famous landmark, the Eiffel Tower. But it wasn't always there, of course. Gustave Eiffel, the tower's architect, was commissioned to expose it during the 1889 World Fair. But the so-called Iron Lady was only meant to stand for 20 years. After that, it was going to be demolished, except that, this plan was never implemented. The tower wasn't taken down because of an antenna built on top of the tower, and it conducts wireless signals. But there's a problem. The Iron Lady is made of iron. And with time and bad weather, which Paris happens to get a lot of, iron deteriorates. It rusts, and this rusting makes the iron weak, up until the point where it can crack. And if a tower that is made purely of iron starts to crack, you know what this means. No more selfies eating croissants in front of the famous Tour Eiffel. Apparently, French authorities are aware that this is happening, but instead of repairing the whole tower, they're kind of just painting over the rust. Your next stop is in beautiful Rome. You are here to visit, you guessed it, the Colosseum, one of the world's most visited monuments. The gladiators used to put on shows there. Well, you might as well say arrivederci to it while you can. Like a lot of ancient monuments, the Colosseum is in danger of disappearing. It survived for almost 2,000 years since it was commissioned by Emperor Vespasian. But due to yearly exposure to harsh weather, the monument is getting weaker. The problem here is mainly snow. When snow falls upon the Colosseum, the freezing water infiltrates the cracks of the rocks and makes them bloat. You know, like when you put a soda can into the freezer and the bottom pops out? I know, snow is a kind of infrequent visitor in Rome, but even rare below-zero temperatures can damage the Colosseum seriously. And since we can't control the weather, who knows how long we'll get to see this beauty around? After hopping on a red-eye to India, you arrive at the unique Taj Mahal. It's even more mesmerizing in person than it is in pictures. The Taj is one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. But why is it at risk of disappearing, you might ask? The monument was finished way back in 1643. It was made with pristine white marble as a gift from Emperor Shah Jahan to his beloved wife. But if our white shirts get dirty just by stepping outside the house, imagine an open-air monument that has existed for over 4 centuries. The Taj Mahal is located in the city of Agra, right beside the Yamuna River. Over the years, the region has become very polluted, and all of this pollution is helping to destroy the Taj. India's Supreme Court has been on the case for many years now, and they say the monument is turning greenish and brown. So, high authorities decided that either the local government restores the Taj Mahal completely, or they'll shut it down, or worse, destroy it. For the good of humanity, I hope they decide to restore it already. Otherwise, we'll be down to only 6 wonders. Finally, you've made it to South America. More specifically, you're now in the mountainous country of Peru. If you're not used to such high altitudes, you might get a little dizzy. But it's worth it to see the mesmerizing Incan ruins of Machu Picchu. The city is located at over 7,000 feet above sea level, and no one knows how the Incas built such a sophisticated village. That's why the site attracts around 440,000 visitors every single year. But since regulation is not so strict, the site is also slowly deteriorating. Machu Picchu may be the victim of something known as over-tourism. I mean, if you look at any footage from the site on a normal day, it's pretty packed up. And even if it's a stone-made town and stones are pretty resistant, they do suffer from erosion. Man-made or weather-made. Oh boy, I really don't like the sound of that. There's another stone monument that you need to check off your list. Can you guess which one it is? Yup, Stonehenge. Located in the peaceful hills of Wiltshire, England, Stonehenge has been around for over 5,000 years. Well, nobody knows exactly when it was built, but bear with me. If the only cause for disappearance would be erosion, then it would make the monument millions of years before it disappeared. But that's not the case. Since 1995, there have been multiple proposals from British authorities to build an underground tunnel that connects southeast and southwest England. The thing is, The tunnel passes underneath Stonehenge, and it might rock the site's foundation. Get it? Rock? Anyway, since the project was suggested, local supporters of the monument have found a Save Stonehenge alliance to keep the monument safe. They strongly believe that any enterprise, such as this tunnel, will severely harm the site. Ah, Egypt. This time, to arrive at your destination, you travel in style. And by that, I mean camels. Just for the photo op, of course. But why are you here? You came to check out the Great Sphinx. You know, the one with the broken nose? The Sphinx was also built way back in the day. Try over 4,000 years ago. And back then, they used what they had at their disposal, limestone. Now, some researchers think that hazardous weather may be damaging the Sphinx's limestones. You see, they're very porous types of rock, so water easily infiltrates inside of them, making erosion stronger and faster. But water is also coming from down below. Unlike the pyramids of Giza, the Great Sphinx was carved directly from the bedrock. And right underneath the monument, there's a riverbed, which also infiltrates into the Sphinx, making it weaker. Fingers crossed that Egypt doesn't get a lot of rainfall in the next few centuries. I hope you brought your swimsuit because it's time to dive deep into the Dead Sea. Except that you probably won't get too deep. You know, since there's so much salt in the water that you basically only float. Fun fact, this sea is 10 times saltier than the ocean. It may be a little ironic that the Dead Sea is at risk of actually perishing, but it's true. The lake level is dropping 4 feet every year. It has to do with one of the sea's main tributaries. A tributary is a river that flows into a much larger body of water. The thing is, the region is not so rich in natural water, so some of the local authorities ended up diverting small tributaries for basic human uses. But since every action has a reaction, the Dead Sea is now facing some difficulties. Back in the USA, it's time to visit the city that never sleeps. And if you've understood this trip by now, you already know the landmark we're visiting. It's Lady Liberty. It may come as a surprise to some, but the famous Statue of Liberty was originally copper. It's turned green due to oxidation. I mean, maybe I would also turn green if I was constantly exposed to New York's harsh weather. Some researchers say that air pollution can also speed up oxidation processes, threatening the long life of Lady Liberty. Of course, New York City does its share of maintenance. Hopefully it'll be enough for us to keep seeing the statue during our lifetime. Hey, it's time to head back home. I sure enjoyed this trip. Hope you did too. Let's hope we can still visit these places.
Hey, check it out. You could technically live in the Eiffel Tower if you don't mind residing in a small apartment. Gustave Eiffel designed the tower to feature a private apartment for himself right at the top of the construction. He left the place all neat and tidy with all the necessary furniture. These days, the apartment is home to 2 mannequins, that of Eiffel himself and his equally famous friend Thomas Edison. A sneak peek at the apartment is available for tourists who purchase a ticket to the top of the tower. If you ever pass through Trafalgar Square, you'll surely miss London's smallest police station, since it's hidden beneath a lamppost. The reason why it was placed there back in 1926 was to let police officers be close to public rallies. They happen quite a lot in that area. Some even said it used to have a direct phone line to Scotland Yard. It's now used as a cleaning station, so there isn't much to see there apart from some mops. Grand Central Station, one of New York's busiest, has a great hidden activity for travelers. There are tennis courts available in a secret space named the Annex. This area used to host a lot of different things back in the day, from a recording studio to an art gallery. These days, though, the location is known as the Vanderbilt Tennis Club and can be visited by the public. Similar to Mr. Eiffel, producer Samuel Lionel Roxy Roxafel designed a hidden apartment for himself in the Radio City Music Hall in New York City. He also asked for the apartment, now called the Roxy Suite, to be decorated in the Art Deco style. It features 20-foot-high ceilings covered in gold leaf and walls with floor-to-ceiling plush drapes. These days, only Radio City performers and VIP guests can visit the location. You might be able to rent it out too, but they say the prices are very high. Rome's best-known symbol, the Colosseum, has secret tunnels hidden beneath its grounds. Back in the day, ancient Romans used these passageways to keep wild animals, like lions, tigers, elephants, and bears, as they were used for gladiator fights and other types of entertainment. They've been open for visitors since 2010, along with the Colosseum's plumbing system. It was quite the technological advancement for the time, featuring drinking fountains and even toilets. There are some people that have criticized the opening of these secret tunnels. They believe it might affect the building's structure, given the huge traffic of visitors. The Empire State Building is said to have 102 floors, but that's not true. It actually has a secret 103rd floor. The way to access it is through a hidden staircase located on the 102nd floor, but it's mostly available for the building's engineers and celebrities from time to time. That's not all. The 103rd floor leads to the Empire State Building's capsule. It's the building's famous dome. One of the most famous American landmarks features a mysterious hidden chamber. If current records are true, there's a secret room behind Abraham Lincoln's head from Mount Rushmore. It was meant to keep relative artifacts and documents of American history, like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. We now know these important documents are kept in another location, and the Mount Rushmore room remains inaccessible to the public to this day. Like maybe it's a video game room for park rangers. Or not. Completed between 2550 and 2490 BCE, the Great Pyramid of Giza is the last remaining of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Constructed as a resting place for the 4th dynasty Egyptian pharaoh Khufu, it was thought to feature the Grand Gallery, the King's Chamber, and the Queen's Chamber. But that's not all, as recently a secret room was discovered here. Dubbed the Big Void, kind of like my head, this huge space is nearly 100 feet long. Its main purpose is still up for debate, but some archaeologists believe it was used as an internal ramp to help build the massive structure. Cinderella Castle is the main attraction of Disney World in Orlando, Florida, in an area called the Magic Kingdom. It does have a hidden room of its own, dubbed the Cinderella Suite. The suite was originally intended to host Walt Disney himself and his family. He passed away in 1966, and he never got to see the final result. It was finally finished in 2006, and ever since, it's only been open a limited number of times and only for visitors invited by the Disney company. Grand Central isn't the only station with hidden features. Italy has its own Milano Centrale, the country's second-largest railway station. More than 320,000 passengers pass by these walls every day. But most of them never notice the closed doors on the sidewall of the station leading to the Royal Pavilion, a fashionable area designed as a waiting room for the royal family. The pavilion features 2 grand halls divided into 2 floors with luxurious furniture, styled marble, all decorated with royal sculptures. Now, even the Statue of Liberty has a hidden room. Try to guess where it is? It's in the torch of the statue. Now, unfortunately, it's not available to the public ever since it was completely closed back in 1916. A camera was placed here back in 2011 to allow people to enjoy live streaming of the panoramic view. A statue of Leonardo da Vinci, located at Rome's Da Vinci Airport, was first unveiled back in 1960. It recently went under renovation. One of the workers made a mysterious discovery during this process: a small hole somewhere in the middle of the statue at about 30 feet. When it was carefully opened, 2 parchments were found inside. Written in classical Latin, the first document told the story of the area that now houses the airport. The other one provided a list of people who attended the inauguration of the statue. The U.S. Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. has a secret sports facility where clerks, off-duty police officers, and other Supreme Court employees can play basketball. The court, located on the top floor of the building, is obviously dubbed the highest court in the land. Excuse me while I dribble. Disneyland's Club 33 is located in the New Orleans Square section of the theme park in Anaheim, California. This exclusive club houses only 500 members, and it was inaugurated in 1967. It aimed to entertain celebrities, politicians, and sponsors. The decorations were courtesy of Walt Disney himself and his wife. Services here come at a hefty price. Members have to pay $25,000 to join the club, and later a yearly fee of between $12,000 to $25,000. The entrance to the club was easy to miss, since it was hidden behind a doorway with a single gold plate that had the number 33 engraved on it. A makeover of the club took place in 2014. They moved the entrance to an even more secret location, but people can still see the old one in its original place. The New York City public libraries have hidden apartments too. Employees and their families could stay in those hidden rooms that are placed above many of the public libraries. Most of them are either closets or empty rooms these days, but some of them are available to the public, like those belonging to the $4.4 million renovation project of the apartment in the Washington Heights branch. It was transformed from an old, dusty, 3,750 square foot space into a dedicated teen area and tech center that also features rooms for adult education programs. Cool!
You've just reached your perfect spot on a deserted beach. It's so quiet here that you start to doze off. But as you open your eyes, you are shocked. Wait a minute, is that an actual house that's just been washed up on the shore? It may sound like the beginning of a sci-fi novel, but not if you live near this beach in El Salvador. There's a mysteriously abandoned house there that looks as if it's just been washed ashore. How did this villa end up there? How long has it been here without anyone noticing it? This mysterious construction is 46 miles south of El Salvador's capital, San Salvador. Locals say the building used to be a hotel called Puerto Ventura. At the time it was built, its main attraction was the fact that it was really close to the sea. Unfortunately, the engineering behind it wasn't well planned out, all because locals didn't need any official permission to start the construction. The hotel was too close to the water and dangerously exposed to the elements. The Roman-style villa is now a mere 50 feet from the edge of the sea when the tide is low. It can only be accessed in the morning, because later, the tides fill the first floor with salt water. What's now left of the hotel looks like the ruins of a two-story house. The front part is very impressive, with Roman-type pillars. It also has wide windows on the second floor. You can still see parts of the iron structures and remains of what used to be the gateway to the second floor. There are some bleachers at the top of the building. They're sometimes used by tourists. More and more people are now browsing the area, taking photos, even though the building is obviously not safe for climbing. There's little information on how long it's been sitting in its current location, but some locals say it's been there for at least 20 years. It had remained a local secret for years before it was discovered by a TikTok user in 2021. But that doesn't answer the question, how did the hotel end up in another location altogether? This is where things become a little fuzzy. While some locals say that the building was abandoned decades ago, others claim it was deserted after Hurricane Mitch hit the area back in 1998. Hurricane Mitch was one of the most dangerous weather phenomena to ever hit Central America. During the storm, the winds traveled at 178 miles per hour, and the hurricane itself lasted for about 15 hours. It was also the cause of a huge amount of rainfall, which resulted in floods and many dangerous landslides. Being built so close to the shoreline, the former hotel had little chance of surviving the extreme weather conditions, so it must have been literally displaced. After sitting under the sun, you might start dreaming of some snowballs getting washed ashore. To even out the temperature. I'm not kidding. This strange natural phenomenon did happen back in 2016. It resulted in about 11 miles of the coast of the Gulf of Aab in West Siberia getting covered with huge snowballs. Because of the low temperatures, small pieces of ice started to form in the water. Afterward, the wind and waves rolled them into giant snowballs. Some of them were the size of a tennis ball, but others were up to 3 feet wide. A 2004 Harley-Davidson night train motorcycle popped up ashore on a British Columbia beach back in 2012. It was neatly packed inside a shipping container. It took some time to do it, but the owner was eventually traced down. His name was Ikuyo Yokoyama, and he lost his motorcycle after a tsunami struck Japan on March 11, 2011. To get to its final destination, the Harley-Davidson traveled more than 4,000 miles. To celebrate its long journey, Yokoyama donated the bike to the Harley-Davidson Museum in Milwaukee. It's been on display there ever since, in case you want to visit. This strange phenomenon made it look as if someone spilled dish soap all over the beach. But it does happen pretty often in Queensland. Sea foam covers the shore there a couple of times each year. It mostly happens after a storm, when ocean waves move dissolved organic matter around. It's basically like a giant ice cream maker. After Cyclone Debbie back in March of 2017, some beaches actually needed to be closed because of huge amounts of white foam. The wind even brought some of that foam to the nearby towns, making locals believe it was snowing. Would you be surprised to see a 6 by 6 foot rusty metal die washed ashore on your local beach? Because back in 2017, people in Coeur d'Alene in Idaho sure were. It turned out to be an old storage tank. Someone decided to spice it up a bit by adding some white spots to make it look like a die. In 1992, thousands of rubber duckies got stranded at sea after a large container ship that was transporting them was hit by a wave. As you can imagine, the ducks started popping up all over the world, in Hawaii, Alaska, South America, Australia, in Europe, and even in the Arctic. It's estimated that a couple hundred of those unlucky rubber ducks are still out there. Interestingly, they turned out to be very useful to scientists. Based on their movements, researchers can monitor the direction of water currents. If you happen to like dinosaurs, you'll be happy to know sea waters can also bring ashore some fossils. In 2018, a large dinosaur jawbone ended up on the coast of Lilstock Beach in Somerset, England. It used to belong to a dinosaur called Ichthyosaurus. Thanks to this finding, scientists were able to make an impressive discovery. Before, they thought the Ichthyosaurus could reach a maximum length of about 69 feet. But after they studied the jawbone, they ended up recalculating the creature's size. They concluded that the Ichthyosaurus could grow up to 85 feet. The Megalodon was the largest predator in our planet's history. It lived almost all over the globe, except near the poles. How do we know that? Because Megalodon teeth keep appearing on beaches every now and then. One staggering Megalodon tooth, which was way over 20 inches long, was discovered in a river in Croatia. Since these creatures have been extinct for about 3 million years, their teeth are highly prized by fossil hunters. A giant Lego man that washed ashore is something I never thought I'd hear about. And it turns out it didn't happen just once. There were 4 of these giant Lego men in total, each around 8 feet tall. One was found in England and one in the Netherlands, while the other 2 popped up in Florida and California. It was surely not a coincidence, and after some research, people found out that a Dutch artist was behind this. Ego Leonard started this project as a personal statement campaign. A short film was even made about this, and it was called No Real Than You Are. This sentence was written on each of the 4 Lego men put to sea. A bundle of over 50 letters was washed ashore in New Jersey on a beach in Atlantic Highlands back in 2012. It happened shortly after Hurricane Sandy had struck the area. A 14-year-old boy found the letters and gave them to his mom. She was so touched by them that she decided to carefully dry and return them to their owner. The letters were the correspondence of 2 people named Dorothy and Lynn. They were dated between 1942 and 1948. The last was written a week before their wedding. With the help of an online genealogy site, the woman reached Dorothy and returned the letters to the 88-year-old woman who was living in a retirement home.
Stonehenge took approximately 20 million man-hours to build. For comparison, an average human doesn't live much over 700,000 hours. This is Jack, one of the first builders of Stonehenge. Let's say Jack lived to be 80 years old, which is extremely improbable, but it makes it easier for me to crunch the numbers, thanks. If Jack had spent his entire life, from age 0 to age 80, working on the Stonehenge project, it would have required approximately 28.5 generations of people doing the same thing to complete it. That's next to impossible. To make it more plausible, let's multiply that by 2. After all, Jack wouldn't want to dedicate his entire life to moving stones, and he didn't live to be that old. Thus, we arrive at around 57 generations needed to build Stonehenge. That's not enough room on the screen for me to introduce John, Jack's great-great-great-great, you get the drift, grandson. So it all began around 5,000 years ago with just a simple circular earthen bank and ditch. Fast forward to around 26,000 BCE, and the builders replaced that initial structure with a complex arrangement of wooden posts and brought in around 80 dolerite bloom stones from Wales, which were rearranged at least 3 times. Then, a few hundred years later, they added those massive sarsen stones, each weighing around 25 tons. These enormous sandstone blocks were transported about 19 miles to create a continuous outer circle, with 5 trilithons, 2 upright stones topped with a lintel, forming a horseshoe shape inside. It was a millennium-long building process that demanded years of hard work. So, people must have lived nearby, right? But how would they have found shelter back then? Today, we have houses for builders on site, small accommodations that serve as temporary housing. But structures like this definitely didn't exist when Stonehenge was constructed. Did they? Well, actually, they existed, and some recent archaeological digs near Stonehenge prove it. Archaeologists found this Stone Age eco-home, which is a huge deal since it's one of the earliest settlements in the area. This newly uncovered Mesolithic home dates back to around the year 4300 BCE. Let's take a closer look at this house, shall we? Now, for the walls, people back then used a large fallen tree, its trunk to be more precise. These wooden walls were reinforced with flint, and they even lined the pit left by the uprooted tree with cobblestones. To create the roof, they opted for animal hides, which sounds like a wise choice. They must have provided protection against the unpredictable weather of the British Isles. Now, you might be wondering, the weather in Britain is indeed unpredictable, and it has been that way since time immemorial. So, how did the builders manage throughout most of the year, particularly during the winter months? Well, the answer is simple. There was a hearth on site, which isn't surprising, but the system they employed was quite ingenious. A hearth inside the house would have posed too great a risk, yet bringing hot stones into the dwelling was perfectly safe. While they were hot, they couldn't ignite the building. So they used these stones from the hearth as a heat storage system to keep warm at night. And as a final touch, they even incorporated various stones for decoration. They didn't exactly get a Pinterest house, but it added a touch of elegance for sure. And if you think this discovery is merely about the houses, think again. It significantly changes our understanding of how people lived during that time. This discovery places them in an important prehistoric setting right at the start of the Neolithic area, sparking some interesting questions about whether these early folks could be related to the people who built Stonehenge. But there's a big worry. Experts are concerned that this significant find, along with other buried archaeological sites, could be at risk if the authorities go ahead with plans to build a tunnel to reroute the A303 away from the World Heritage Site. Sure thing the house the scientists found wasn't in perfect shape, and it lacked some crucial elements people use for living. Some of them decayed over time, while others were simply absent. So the scientists took 20 tons of chalk, 5,000 hazel rods, and 3 tons of straw, and used all this to recreate the 4,500-year-old design houses. These new buildings are located close to Stonehenge, which is incredible since in this area, planning permission for even a new cowshed is problematic. So, what are these houses like? Well, first off, there are 4 of them, and they're oval-shaped. They're built on the foundation of real houses that stood there about 4,500 years ago, just around the time the Stonehenge Eco House was going up. The houses aren't very big, they're single-room structures. When it comes to dimensions, it was straightforward to estimate since we could gauge the size of the roof and the height of the walls based on the foundations. Each side measures about 16 feet. However, the roof structure remains a bit of a mystery. There were a few differing thatching techniques back then, so pinpointing the exact method used for these dwellings is kind of a guessing game. For now, we think it involves knotted or tied straw carefully secured onto a hazel-woven frame. When fires are lit, the smoke from the hearth wafts up through the thatched roof. Now, remember those 20 tons of chalk? That was needed for the floors and walls. The white chalk walls and floors reflect sunlight and capture heat from the fire. But here's the kicker. The builders encountered a challenge because the ground was so waterlogged that some of the chalk floors took weeks to dry out. By the time they should have been bone dry, they were still as sticky as chewing gum. Now, it's safe to say people 4,500 years ago faced similar struggles, and we can really appreciate what they went through while building their homes. The final layer of daub was applied using rags, giving a smooth, almost shiny finish that looks surprisingly classy. The interiors are furnished with wooden and wicker beds and shelves, along with clay pots and jars, all centered around a cozy hearth. The spaces feel surprisingly roomy and are filled with light that streams in through the thatched roof, bouncing off those white walls. Plus, the woven furniture adds a nice touch of authenticity to the vibe. The fires have been lit, and the first meal, bread crafted from flour ground on a stone mill next to the hearth, has been prepared. Those who tried the bread were pleasantly surprised by its flavor, finding it quite tasty. Now, here comes the bummer. Those who recreated the houses did cheat a little. While the materials used were authentic, the tools weren't. They used cement mixers to mix the daub, wheelbarrows to transport the timber, and logs by the hearth were split with steel axes instead of stone ones. Still, the builders aren't professionals, they're volunteers. So I think a bit of cheating is totally cool in this case. There are other volunteers on site who are more than happy to chat about the daily activities of the Stonehenge builders, from grinding grain with a quern to making rope from rushes. But these houses and the Eco House aren't the only remarkable things in the Stonehenge area. Some years ago, archaeologists uncovered a burial site close to Stonehenge that predates the monument itself. This Neolithic long barrow, dating back approximately 56 to 5,700 years, likely contains the remains of some of Britain's earliest inhabitants. The burial site was identified through aerial images that revealed its distinct shape beneath the crops. Salisbury Plain is rich with ancient sites, including Stonehenge, various mounds, and monuments. The area has remained undisturbed over the centuries, which is likely why so many ancient structures are still intact. This discovery also shows a significant shift in human lifestyle during that era, marking a transition from a nomadic existence to settled farming and animal husbandry, much like the Eco House itself. The long barrow in question measures about 85 feet long and 65 feet wide, though much of its above-ground structure has been lost to farming over the years. If this site is like others in the vicinity, it contains the remains of 30 to 50 individuals, along with cow skulls, which were significant to those early communities.
Before we get into the reason why and how there are pyramids all around the world, let's talk about some of the examples. I'll start with the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico. These folks really knew how to build a city. Their well-planned urban center spanned over 7 square miles and boasted several pyramids. But the Pyramid of the Sun is the most impressive. This giant pyramid was built way back in 100 CE and is one of the biggest structures of its kind in the whole Western Hemisphere. It's so big that it's 216 feet high above the ground. If you ever find yourself in this ancient city, you won't be able to miss the Pyramid of the Sun. It's right there on the east side of the Avenue of the Dead, the city's main north-south street. To build this incredible pyramid, around 1 million cubic yards of material were used, including a special kind of red volcanic rock called hued tezontle. Impressive, huh? We don't know too much about the people who built the Pyramid of the Sun or its purpose. But archaeologists believe there was once a temple on top of it. When explorers went below the pyramid in the 1970s, they found a bunch of cool tunnels and chambers. In 2011, they even found a secret stash of clay pots. obsidian pieces, animal bones, human figurines, and a mask. Who knows what other secrets the pyramid is hiding? If you decide to see this one, you must climb the pyramid using the 248 uneven steps on the west side. Watch your step. Sudan got some pyramids too. Nubian pyramids aren't as big as the ones in Egypt, but they still got around 200 of them. These ancient pyramids have been home to the tombs of the pharaohs of the Meroitic kingdom for almost 1,000 years, who ruled Egypt from Nubia to the Mediterranean Sea. The pyramids at Meroe were constructed using granite and reddish sandstone. Oh, and did you know that Sudan has more ancient pyramids than Egypt? The Kushite pyramids depict the indigenous architecture and burial traditions of Nubia's Napata and Meroe kingdoms, which ancient Egypt influenced. Meroe, the burial site of over 40 queens and kings, is the most extensive Nubian pyramid site. The tomb walls depict mummified royals bedecked in jewelry, their wooden caskets containing bows, quivers of arrows, and other artifacts pointing to the Meroitic relationship and trade with Egyptian and Greek civilizations. So if you're looking for some ancient tombs to explore, you may consider skipping the crowds in Egypt and heading on down to Sudan. Let's fly to Iraq to see some more pyramids. Ziggurats have fancy receding layers and tiered temples. Instead of a smooth exterior, it has tiers like a cake. Perfect for all the important work and rituals that went on inside. You can find these towering structures scattered throughout Iraq and Iran, and they're a real testament to the power and skills of the people who built them. One of the biggest and most impressive ziggurats is the ziggurat at Ur. It's basically a giant rectangular pyramid that stands a whopping 70 to 100 feet tall, with 3 levels of terraces and a temple on top. Can you imagine how many baked bricks it took to build that thing? Try 720,000 for just the lower portion. This particular ziggurat was built for Sumerian king Ur-Nammu. Similar to other ones, this pyramid has been around for thousands of years, so it got a little rough around the edges. Thankfully, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II and some archaeologists came to the rescue in the 6th and 20th centuries respectively, and now you can find this near Talil Air Base. The ziggurat at Ur was built in 2100 BCE by King Ur-Nammu for the moon deity Nana. It was the tallest building in the city, and you could see it from miles around. It was like the medieval cathedral spire of its day. People would come here to bring their agricultural surplus and get their food allotments and seek spiritual nourishment. Sadly, the Nana temple at the top of the ziggurat didn't survive, but we do have some blue glazed bricks that may have been part of its decoration. The lower parts of the ziggurat are pretty amazing though. The architects even included holes in the temple's baked exterior to let the water evaporate from its core. Since we explored some of the pyramids on our planet, let's take a broader perspective. They can be found in many parts of the world. Egypt has over 100 pyramids, double that number in Sudan, and dozens of others are scattered in the Middle East and China. The Americas have the most pyramids in total, with more pyramids than the rest of the world combined. These pyramids are located in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Time to know more about the evolution of pyramids through history. The oldest pyramid is in Egypt. This pyramid was a step pyramid, which was created by placing one layer of stone on top of another. The pharaoh Sneferu is credited with creating the pyramid shape we recognize today. During his 45-year reign, he built 3 pyramids. His first 2 attempts failed, but he finally got it right with the Red Pyramid, which is considered the first true pyramid. It was Sneferu's son, Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid of Giza, which was the tallest human-made structure on Earth for almost 4,000 years. Latin American pyramids are similar to early Egyptian step pyramids, but they were built independently with no knowledge of each other. The pyramids in Sudan were built around 700 BCE and are tall but much narrower than those in Egypt. How in the world did all these civilizations build these things without even texting each other? After all, the Aztecs, Mayans, and ancient Egyptians were about as different as possible. But despite their cultural differences, they all seem to agree on one thing. Pyramids were pretty cool. Step pyramids are all around the world because they were the most feasible and stable way to build large and tall structures without access to lighter building materials like wood and metal. The triangular form with a square base is the best way to build a sturdy structure, and having a cube structure would require more material for less height. Now, when it comes to pyramid design, the Egyptian pyramids were like giant triangles with a square base, smooth sides, and a pointy top. On the other hand, the Aztecs and Mayans went for a tiered cake look, with steps leading up to a flat platform on top. So, while all these pyramids share the same basic shape, they have their own unique flair. Each group built its pyramids using different materials, techniques, and slope angles. So while they may have been inspired by each other's work occasionally, they were just doing their own thing. Egyptian pyramids had smooth, angled sides that were designed to help the pharaoh's soul ascend to heaven. The Pyramid of the Sun was built over a series of caves that served as a passageway for the deities. The Maya built the Temple of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza to honor the deity Kukulkan, usually represented by a serpent. Nicknamed El Castillo, it has 91 steps on each side, plus a platform. That's 365 steps, one for each day of the Mayan calendar. Tell me, Brightsiders, how were pyramids built? To begin with, humans made them, not a foreign race from space that landed on Earth. You see, one thing that all pyramids have in common is that they were built without advanced tools or even the wheel. It took a lot of people to build them, including skilled laborers and architects. For example, it's estimated that 20,000 people built the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it's believed that most of them were skilled laborers. Building pyramids was a massive undertaking that required years of planning and effort. The Great Pyramid at Cholula, Mexico, took 600 years to complete.
I bet you've never heard of the legendary oasis of Zerzura. This ancient city is said to be hidden somewhere deep in the Sahara Desert, and its discovery could mean unimaginable riches and untold secrets. According to an anonymous 15th century Arabic guide, the key to unlocking the city lies in the beak of a bird carved on the city gate. Zerzura might not be as popular as Machu Picchu or the pyramids, but that just makes it more mysterious. Legend has it that Zerzura is built around this big oasis somewhere in the desert west of the Nile. Apparently, it's made out of white stone and has all these luxurious houses and gold decorations. The story goes that a scribe wrote down the account of a traveler who stumbled upon Zerzura while looking for his lost camel. At one point in his journey, the man got caught up in a sandstorm, where he got separated from the rest of his group. The traveler kept wandering in the desert for days, and then, out of nowhere, two men showed up and guided him to the city of Zerzura. The traveler described this city as an oasis filled with little birds and made out of pure white stonework. The city is also said to be guarded by giants. In 1835, an English Egyptologist named John Gardner Wilkinson mentioned the city in one of his books. He spoke to a man from Egypt who found the city by accident after days of wandering through the desert. He mentioned some ruins, unusual stonework, and a large oasis surrounded by palm trees. The man even gave some instructions on how the city could be found, indicating that it might be in the western desert of Egypt. But here's the kicker. Even though a group of explorers went out to find Zerzura, they didn't succeed. At the same time, they did stumble upon a bunch of previously unknown oases. In the early 1900s, numerous expeditions were sent to find the city, including one with a fleet of Ford Model A trucks. But, alas, none were successful. Others say Zerzura did exist at one point, but not anymore. It's possible it was swallowed by the desert. It's believed that back in the day, the Sahara Desert was actually green. Scientists even found traces of ancient rivers that flowed through the area 100,000 years ago, creating green corridors across the desert. But Zerzura might have never been real to begin with. Maybe it only existed in the minds of people, a figment of their imagination as they were struggling in the African desert. For thousands of years, people have been obsessed with the hunt for another lost city, Atlantis. But if this place really existed, where on Earth, or under the sea, could it be? According to Plato, Atlantis was an actual place, and it was supposedly located somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, near the Strait of Gibraltar. But how did this mythical city become synonymous with a perfect, paradise-like society? Well, you can thank Ignatius Donnelly for that. The American writer published a book in 1882 where he outlined 13 hypotheses about the existence of Atlantis. Donnelly truly believed that this lost city was where ancient humans lived in peace and joy for centuries. Donnelly even thought that Atlantis was the original source of many ancient civilizations around the world. And if we just followed Plato's clues, we could totally find Atlantis. Sounds like a treasure hunt, right? What inspired Donnelly to go on this quest in the first place, you might ask? Apparently, an amateur archaeologist discovered the city of Troy, using Homer's The Iliad as a guide. Well, if Troy was real, then why not Atlantis? Back in the day, some people believed that America was the legendary Atlantis. Columbus really stirred up some excitement when he brought back news about the New World to Europe. But the real hunt for Atlantis didn't really start until the 20th and 21st centuries. Some people tried to connect the dots between a volcanic eruption on the island of Santorini and the destruction of Minoan settlements. But in 2018, a team of investigators claimed they had nailed it, announcing they had discovered concrete proof that Atlantis had existed. What was their evidence, you ask? A series of mysterious circles in a national park in Spain. But the circles turned out to be nothing more than experimental ponds for studying zooplankton. Let's face it, there's no real evidence that Plato's lost city of Atlantis actually existed. But it doesn't make searching for it any less exciting, does it? The Fountain of Youth isn't a lost city per se, but it is another mythical location that many have claimed to have stumbled upon over the years. Long ago, people were obsessed with the idea of living forever, or at least extending their lives as much as possible. Each culture had its own wild story, like the Greeks talking about a magic fountain that let people live longer, or Alexander the Great finding a river of paradise that could heal the wounded. Japanese legends spoke of hot springs that could make you young again, while the Caribbean locals talked about the restorative powers of the water in one of their own mystical lands. Explorers searched far and wide for these magical waters, but nothing. Probably the most famous of all was the story of the Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon, who thought he'd found it in Florida. Now, Ponce de Leon was quite a character. He sailed with Columbus and became an important figure in the area now known as the Dominican Republic. He found gold in Puerto Rico and even became the island's administrator. But when the ruler of Spain decided to replace him in his duties, he got upset and decided to explore Florida, looking for gold and the elusive Fountain of Youth. He explored the Bahamas, but sadly, he didn't find any gold or magic water. He did, however, make his way to Florida. He explored the coast and even discovered the Gulf Stream. Unfortunately, his last expedition didn't go well, and he was wounded. but the legend of him searching for the Fountain of Youth lived on. Even though historians don't think he was really looking for the Fountain of Youth, thousands of people visit the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park every year to try the sulfur-smelling water. It's the oldest attraction in Florida, which has been around since the 17th century. Some say the water has unusual properties, but I'll leave that up to you to decide after you visit this place. Norse mythology has its own mysterious land called Thule. It's said to be somewhere between Scandinavia and Iceland, where the sun barely shines and the cold bites hard. The folks there survive on a diet of millet, herbs, fruits, and roots, washed down with a grain and honey brew. As for its exact location, scholars can't seem to agree on it to this day. The legendary ancient Greek explorer Pytheas was said to be the first to stumble upon Thule during his quest for tin mines. He sailed his way up north, passing by Scotland, and after 6 long days of sailing, he reached Thule. The people there, according to Pytheas, were quite primitive, but that's no surprise since they were just simple farmers living off the land. They showed Pytheas where the sun set on the shortest day of the year. They also told him that in winter, the sun never rose at all, and in summer, there was no night. For many years, historians have been debating the true identity of this mythical land of Thule. Some say it's Iceland, while others claim it's Norway. A little bit of progress has been made recently with the help of a team of researchers. If their findings are correct, Thule might be the elusive island of Smola. That's farther south than any of the Norwegian islands that were on the list of contenders. It may be too soon to celebrate, but it does look like Thule has finally been found. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to walk on diamonds, head straight to the town of Nördlingen in Germany. It seems like a typical fairy tale village with cute houses and red roofs, but its walls and streets are actually studded with over 72,000 diamonds. You'll need a microscope to see them, but they're definitely there. When the first people came to live here, somewhere around the 9th century CE, they were positive they were settling down in a volcanic crater. They didn't know the stone they were using for construction was embedded with millions of tiny diamonds, and the origins of the crater were out of this world. An asteroid slightly larger than half a mile in diameter hit our planet around 14.5 million years ago in what is now Bavaria and left a crater 16 miles wide. The bedrock was under such intense heat and pressure that the bubbles of carbon inside transformed into tiny diamonds at a concentration like nowhere else in the world. The locals didn't pay attention to their houses, built of what was left of that asteroid impact, shimmering on sunrise. Then, in the 1960s, 2 geologists arrived from the USA, studied the landscape from a distance, and noticed it didn't look exactly like a volcanic crater. After further research, they realized their theory that the crater was shaped from above and not from below proved right. They even had to change school books after the discovery, not to mislead the students. Once the word of the crater had spread, NASA got interested in it and sent their Apollo 14 and Apollo 16 astronauts to visit it to learn about what kind of rocks they'd find in space and which of them were worth bringing home. A moon rock that arrived with one of the missions is now on display at the local museum, and astronauts still visit the place. The locals, though, are so used to living among diamonds, they don't even find it special. The Australian town of Coober Pedy is known as the opal capital of the world and exists completely underground. The town even has the first 4-star underground hotel in the world. The reason people settled in this area was to work at an opal mine. Back in the day, the miners could hardly survive under the burning desert sun, so someone decided to put a tent directly into the mine. Then it turned into a home. Now, Coober Pedy has around 2,500 residents from different countries, about 30 shops, an opal gallery, museums, a bar, and other buildings, and is a popular tourist attraction. The town of Manawi, Nebraska, in the USA, has a mayor, a clerk, a treasurer, a librarian, a tavern keeper, and a bartender. Yet, the population is officially just one. Elsie Eiler has been doing all those jobs, paying taxes to herself, and voting herself for mayor since 2004. Back in the 1930s, Manawi had a population of 150 people, grocery shops, and restaurants. When farming conditions got worse, people started leaving family by family until it went down to one person. If you feel like saving some money on house construction, look up some property in the Spanish town of Centenil de las Bodegas. 3,000 residents live under and into the sides of the Cadiz Mountains and use them as natural walls and ceilings. The first settlers moved in here back in prehistoric times. The rocks keep the houses cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Neft Dashleri in Azerbaijan was built as an oil platform in 1940, directly in the Caspian Sea. Once they discovered rich oil deposits, it started growing and is now made up of a network of platforms with around 5,000 people working and living here. The town has apartments, bridges, a library, a community center, and even a movie theater. The Japanese village of Nagoro has an unofficial second name, the Scarecrow Village. The last children were born here over 20 years ago. It officially has less than 50 residents, but it feels complete thanks to 350 life-size human dolls. When a local lady came back here in 2000 to look after her aging father, she saw the empty streets, shops, and schools. To change that, she and her friends started making cute dolls to replace the residents. The entire town of Whittier, Alaska, lives under one roof of a 14-story building of a former barracks. That's around 220 people who live here all year round, plus all the shops, a police station, a post office, a hospital, and a church. The locals are mostly working in commercial fishing, recreation, and tourism, or for the state ferry and railroad. The idea behind having everyone and everything in one place is to save money on heating in the always cold climate and let the people do all their business inside. This way, they don't have to face the unbearably strong winds. There's a town in Svalbard, Norway called Longyearbyen, where the sun sets on October 25th and doesn't rise again for the next 4 months. When it rises again in spring, the locals gather on the step of an old hospital at 12:15 to welcome the sun and celebrate its return. Then, it doesn't set for over 4 months. It happens because of the way the Earth is tilted on its axis. The sun only rises and sets once each year at the North and South Poles. Longyearbyen is the northernmost town in the world, so it gets affected by that. Its residents occasionally see polar bears and reindeer in the streets and get around on snowmobiles. The Italian village of Viganella was built right at the bottom of a deep valley and on the wrong side of the mountains. They cast huge shadows and deprived the village of the sun for the entire winter. The locals used to live like that for centuries, until one engineer decided to build a large mirror high on the opposite slope of the mountain. It's operated by a computer and reflects light on the central square of Viganella for at least 6 hours a day during the darkest months. Santa Cruz del Islote in Colombia is one of the world's most crowded islands, with around 600 residents in a 2.5-acre area. Fishermen built this island on a coral platform over a century ago. They chose it because of its beautiful location and the absence of mosquitoes. The families of the original settlers were growing, and most of them never left the island. You'll only find people with 6 different last names living here. When the family needs extra space, they just add an extra floor to one of around 100 homes in town. Now it has a school, shops, a church, and 1 restaurant. There is no traffic, since the streets aren't wide enough for cars or trucks, and the distances are perfectly walkable. No one on the island locks their doors, because everyone knows each other, and there hasn't been a single crime. Another place where people don't lock their doors is the Shani Shingnapur village in India. In fact, Local homes and even shops don't have front doors, keys, and locks, but locals never feel unsafe. Residents believe their village is under the protection of Lord Shani, who will punish anyone who tries to steal something. A legend says that around 300 years ago, after heavy rain and flooding, the locals found a huge rock. The same night, Lord Shani appeared in the dreams of the village head and promised to protect the village if they kept the rock in the village unsheltered. The deity would live on the rock and oversee the village. Once the first bank opened in the village, they added a glass entrance and a barely visible electromagnetic lock with a remote control to respect the tradition. If you're looking for the most relaxed place in the world, check out the Villages in Florida. You can't move here unless there is at least one person over 55 in your home. And you'd have to leave behind any family members under 19. The most popular means of transportation in the villages is a golf cart. There are all sorts of free fun activities for the residents, so it's far from boring.
Rekat structure is a giant formation in the Sahara that looks exactly like a giant bullseye. It's so wide that you can see it from space. Even the CIA got interested in it. In 1965, they planned a flyover looking for geomagnetic anomalies. The findings are still classified. Perhaps the theories are true, and this place is truly the lost city of Atlantis. Now, Atlantis supposedly sank beneath the waves, but recent discoveries are pointing us in a different direction. This is an ancient story that goes far back in time, and Plato was the first to mention it. The place had loads of greenery and a curious structure: 3 concentric circles of land surrounding 2 circles of water. 2 key quotes from Plato's writing suggest that Atlantis might not have been a typical island in the middle of the ocean. Plus, Atlantis had a major influence from Africa and Europe, challenging the idea of it being in the Atlantic. It turns out that the Eye of the Sahara and Atlantis look alike. When astronauts saw the Eye of Sahara from above, they initially suspected a meteorite impact crater, but the rings of the structure matched the layout described of Atlantis. More importantly, the Sahara wasn't always a desert. It turned from a tropical region into a desert around 11,000 years ago. Researchers found evidence of a massive river called the Tamaracet that could have sustained a community. This river flowed toward the Rekat structure, aligning with Plato's description. The Trans-Saharan Seaway ran through the Sahara 50 to 100 million years ago. The sea allegedly destroyed Atlantis around 11,500 years ago, likely due to a rapid rise in sea level caused by the end of the Ice Age. NASA's worldview imagery shows patterns consistent with this theory. Those concentric rings might be a key to unlocking the secrets of our planet's evolution over millions of years. They're shaped by erosion on resilient rock layers, creating a spooky pattern of ridges and troughs. The central peak stands proud at 1,300 feet. The central part has undergone a significant erosion makeover, revealing a circular structure with a raised peak. Unlike impact craters, the Eye of the Sahara flaunts a striking balance and symmetry. Some say it results from rock uplift, sculpted by wind and water. Others think it's an ancient anticline, eroded to reveal its concentric glory. Then there's a salt diapir theory, suggesting that salt's buoyancy sculpted this beauty. Dating techniques have proved that it formed 541 to 252 million years ago, give or take a million or two. Ancient tools are scattered around the outer rings of the structure near riverbeds. Some older stone tools have also been spotted in the same areas. And still, even though some spear points from the Neolithic period have been found, there aren't many signs that people were living there back then. The area seems to have been used for short-term activities like hunting and making tools. There are other unearthly mysteries that haunt our world. One such enigma is in Norway, the ominous Hessdalen light phenomenon, also known as the Valley of Lights, leaves scientists confused. This valley is 10 miles wide. It's quite isolated, but a peculiar blue box sits high on the hillside, equipped with cameras scanning the valley. The unsettling saga began in the 1980s, when the night sky over Hessdalen erupted with burning fireballs, a recurring spectacle that sent shivers down the spines of those who witnessed it. This wasn't a fleeting occurrence, rather it became a regular thing. Terrified locals reported encounters with these unexplained luminous phenomena, some of which happened near their homes. Unease spread like wildfire. At its peak, there were about 20 sightings every week. The phenomenon made its way into newspapers, magazines, and media worldwide. Soon, people flocked to the valley, hoping to see the lights themselves. In 1984, experts joined the fray, armed with sophisticated instruments like magnetometers, radiometers, and other ometers. What they encountered was mind-bending, lights that defied explanation. Some moved at a leisurely pace, while others raced through the sky at an astonishing 19,000 miles per hour. People tried to explain these lights: airplanes, distant reflections, ball lightning, satellites, planets, meteors. But the speed and how these lights danced ruled out all those theories. We're slowly approaching another mysterious place. This is the greatest subglacial lake among Antarctica's 675 known lakes. It can easily hide unknown life forms. This lake is beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. Dive about 2.5 miles under the ice, and there you'll see Lake Vostok, located at 1,600 feet below sea level. This lake is 155 miles long and 31 miles wide at its broadest point. With an average depth of 1,400 feet, it's also the world's sixth largest by volume. It's like an underwater city with lofty pillars and deep basins. The secret lake was discovered in 1993, yet it had been waiting to be found down there for over 2,000 years, collecting ancient secrets. In 2012, scientists drilled through the ice, creating the longest ice core ever. They pierced the ice all the way to the lake's surface. The year 2013 brought an unexpected twist when the tranquil waters erupted during the extraction of an ice core, mixing with drilling fluids. Then they got a pristine water sample in 2015. Some believe there might be previously unknown life forms down there, since it's a fossil water reserve that's been untouched for millions of years. That could be a lot like those speculated ice-covered oceans on moons like Europa and Enceladus. It all started with a theory in the 19th century, suggesting fresh water lurking under Antarctic ice sheets. Then, in 1955, seismic soundings hinted at a subglacial lake, and by the 90s, satellite data confirmed Lake Vostok's existence. Now, Lake Vostok isn't alone. In 2005, they found an island in the middle of the lake. Then, two smaller lakes joined the party. They suspect that a secret network of subglacial rivers might link these lakes. Now, very far away from Antarctica, in Venezuela, Catatumbo lightning presents a sinister light show at the junction of the Catatumbo River and Lake Maracaibo. This unsettling lightning phenomenon happens at about 140 to 160 nights a year, going on for 10 hours a day, and can flash up to 280 times in a single hour. The frequency of this lightning show changes with the seasons and from year to year. There was a break between January to March in 2010, causing a bit of worry that it might vanish forever. As the sun sets, winds from the east start picking up speed. The strong wind is called a nocturnal low-level jet, like what you see in the Great Plains of North America. These winds bring moisture, mostly from the Caribbean and the lake itself. This humid air hits high mountain ridges, causing thunderstorms to form over the mountains. Thanks to the ongoing wind situation, more thunderstorms appear as the night goes on. This pattern repeats itself, and is why this area has the highest annual lightning rate globally. The next place scientists cannot explain is in China. That is the Longyu Caves. They have lofty slanted roofs and sturdy pillars. The spot remained hidden for centuries. These human-made caverns, built around 2,000 years ago, decided to reveal themselves only in the 90s. Local farmers drained some ponds and unveiled 5 massive caverns. Further digging exposed an additional 19 smaller caves. They range from 60 to 110 feet in width and 26 to 50 feet in height. Archaeologists found historical relics from the reign of Emperor Zhuan of Han, dating back to over 2,000 years ago. Now, how did these caves survive for more than 2 millennia without falling apart? No ancient records explain the way they were crafted either. The walls show chisel marks, hinting at some layer-by-layer chiseling action, but the exact construction process is still a head-scratcher. Recently, scientists made an astonishing discovery that might solve Stonehenge's mystery. They found something hidden deep within the DNA of Stonehenge's sarsen rocks, the huge monolithic ones, and it might reveal why our Neolithic ancestors designed and built this thing in the first place. Over the years, scientists have been scratching their heads trying to figure out where the huge sarsen rocks came from. For years, they believed they came from a quarry just 15 miles away from the site, known as Marlborough Downs. At this site, they found similar minerals to the ones that make up the sarsen rocks. But it turned out there was more to this story than they thought. The understanding of how Stonehenge was built is always changing. Scientists need to really travel back in time to uncover its mysteries. Where did the rocks come from? How were they carried? Why was the site built? You see, the Stonehenge site, located at Salisbury Plain in England, is made up of two main types of stone. There are the super heavy sarsens and the lighter and smaller bluestones. The sarsens each weigh about 25 tons. That's as much as 3 African elephants stacked together. The heaviest sarsen stone, called the heel stone, weighs 30 tons all by itself. Together, the sarsens make that iconic outer ring circle. Inside that circle, that's where you'll find the bluestones. The naming might seem a bit misleading since they're not really blue. They have a bluish tinge to them when they are freshly broken, hence the name. These smaller rocks probably came from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, which is about 150 miles away from Stonehenge. They're a bit lighter than the sarsens, but still pretty heavy. The altar stone, which is classified as a bluestone, is the heaviest one, weighing around 6 tons. Its original location still isn't known for sure. To figure out where a rock came from, scientists first have to study their composition. This is like checking the rock's DNA. Then they cross-reference the structure of the rock with minerals in the soil to see if it's a match. Most of the sarsens we see around southern England are actually made of a type of sandstone known as silcrete. Think of silcrete as sand that's been hardened by underground water processes over millions of years. This process mostly happened during a period called the Paleogene, about 65 to 23 million years ago. These sarsen rocks didn't form in one big slab, but in patches, like nature leaving little rock gardens all over the place. Scientists reason the sarsens spread out randomly, forming in isolated pockets. Over time, many were buried under layers of clay and chalk, which helped preserve them. When ancient builders were on the lookout for materials, these sarsens must have looked perfect for something impressive like Stonehenge. Actually, sarsens have been used in everything, from Roman villas to medieval churches, and even in things like road curbs and old field walls. One could say these rocks were the it material for ancient builders, and continue to be popular even into more modern times. This fact made scientists start wondering that maybe not all sarsen stones that were used to build Stonehenge came from the same place. They've identified sarsen sites all over the UK, in places such as Oxfordshire and Kent. After hundreds of years of studying the sarsens, geologists finally had the right type of technology to determine the origin of the stones. Now, I wish I could tell you that it was some undisclosed location very far away from the site. But, as it turned out, the sarsens were originally from Westwoods, the forest near Stonehenge. A new factor came into play when excavations uncovered empty stone holes, showing that at least 6 bluestone pillars were removed from a Preseli Hills site called Wan Main in prehistory. They had a stone circle over there, and it's believed that some of Stonehenge's rocks were recycled rocks from this more ancient circle. If this is true, it might be that Stonehenge is part of a much larger landscape of ancient sites. If this is the case, then Stonehenge is just the cherry on top of a much larger scale project. Think of it as the sacred centerpiece of an entire landscape of monuments, mounds, stone circles, and things. This is why scientists want to find out where the rocks came from so badly, It could lead to why and how Stonehenge was built. Now, Stonehenge didn't just pop up overnight. It was built in several stages over hundreds of years. It's likely that it wasn't a single unified vision, but more like a big community project that evolved over time. With each generation, the builders brought in their own ideas, creating a stone structure that would last for ages. The first stage was around 3100 BCE. That's when people dug out a circular ditch and likely set up some bluestones as sort of a starter ring. Later, they added the Sarsens and even topped some of them with horizontal stones to form those famous arches you see today, also known as the trilithons. These ancient builders had some challenges on their hands. How would they move the rocks? There's an old theory known as the ice road that suggests that the rocks were moved by natural icy pathways that formed during the winter. This way, they could slide the rocks down all the way to Stonehenge. But hey, if we're talking about a distance of over 100 miles, that's not too realistic. Anyways, this theory was debunked because it was warmer back then than it is today. There's also the river theory, which suggests that the rocks were floated along the river from the quarry to the site. But if we're talking about Sarsen rocks, they're too heavy to float. So there goes that theory. What we're saying is, no one knows how the rocks were moved. Another interesting science tidbit came from all the research done in Stonehenge. A recent laser survey of the stones revealed the different stone working methods used, and has shown that some of the parts of the monument were more carefully finished than others. In particular, the northeast side and the inner faces of the central trilithons were finely dressed. FYI, a trilithon is one of Stonehenge's most famous shapes. It's when two huge monoliths receive a third one on top of them, connecting the two together. This fancy word is simply Greek for having three stones. But anyways, the bigger question, and the reason Stonehenge is so famous, is why it was built in the first place. Theories are all over the place, and some sound like they're straight out of a sci-fi show. So here's a rundown of the most popular ideas. There's, of course, the solar calendar theory. This one supposes that the stones are aligned with the movements of the sun, especially during the summer and winter solstices. During the summer solstice, the sun rises to the left of the heel stone, that's the lone stone outside the main circle, lighting up the entire monument. Some say it's the ancient version of a calendar, marking the year's longest and shortest days. Some archaeologists think Stonehenge might have been an ancient healing center. Pieces of bluestone have been found chipped away, possibly by people who believed they had healing powers. The theory goes that people traveled from all over to come to Stonehenge in hopes of a cure for whatever was ailing them. There's also some speculation that Stonehenge was the place to be. Think of it as an ancient gathering spot. Some evidence suggests that communities from distant areas traveled to Stonehenge for gatherings, feasts, and ceremonies. Studies of bones found near the site show they came from all over Britain, making it a sort of prehistoric meetup location. This just in, the world's oldest pyramid was built during the last ice age. And I'm not even talking about Egypt. I'm saying our ancestors might have spewed a 27,000-year-old pyramid in West Java. Gunung Padang is not exactly shouting pyramid. It's more of a mound with huge scattered stones tossed all over it. But local people seem to revere it, and they have for centuries. It wasn't until recently that the Indonesian authorities decided to excavate a bit deeper to see what all the fuss was about. They ended up finding the remains of a human settlement. It was rather unexpected, since the mound is pretty high up. This excavation could only prove there were humans in the area as far back as 45 BCE, which sounds reasonable. It was up to an Indonesian geologist named Donnie Hillman to prove that Gunung Padang is the world's first pyramid. He used all sorts of new technology to support his claim. Our guy used carbon dating, which digs deep into the earth and takes whole chunks of soil. He found layers and layers of constructions, like he was digging up Rome and finding ancient buildings buried in the ground. His research proved that there had been caverns and even rooms down there, which could only mean one thing: humans. As for the rocks located up in the mound, they were most likely strategically placed by the people who lived there back in the day. They needed a place to meditate, so they arranged things in a harmonious way. Their smooth surfaces wouldn't be the result of years of erosion, but the works of great sculptures, the Michelangelos of their day, let's say. If this is all for real, then human civilizations began way before we think they did. Our ancestors, the Paleolithic humans, didn't have what it took to be considered a civilization, especially not the tools and knowledge to build pyramids. They needed a lot of masonry skills, which weren't all that available during the last ice age. His peers don't share this view though. They could believe Hillman's theory if he had found evidence such as charcoal and bone fragments, but he didn't. Flint Dibble, another archaeologist, says that without concrete evidence of human activity, there's no proof of an actual pyramid. In this case, all the data proves is that the soil in the mound dates back to 27,000 years ago. He thinks the rocks on top of the mound just slipped down the hill like rocks normally do. Only a complex society would have managed to build a stepped pyramid like they claim it was. But according to Bill Farley, an American archaeologist, there's just no reason to believe there were any settlements in Indonesia during the last ice age. Now, just so you know, the oldest known ancient society with this kind of knowledge is probably 11,000 years old and used to occupy the region of modern-day Turkey. Take a look, Turkey's Gobekli Tepe. It's also not a pyramid, but it's the oldest monolithic construction made by humans. Back in the Neolithic period, a lot of people settled there, and there are proofs for it. For example, the walls there are covered in ancient drawings of clothing and wild animals. Until recently, the title of the world's oldest pyramid went to a three-sided construction known as the Djoser Pyramid in Egypt. Djoser is located just a few miles south of the Giza complex in a town called Saqqara. It made its way to popular culture more than once. In the 18th century, it became a common feature in European paintings. Young men from the cultural elite did a grand tour around the world, and Saqqara was at the top of their list. It was also featured in the video game Assassin's Creed, with a digital representation way more accurate than many historical drawings of the thing. That was kind of a big deal in ancient Egypt, to build pyramids for kings to spend their afterlives. And if you thought the Khufu pyramid was the oldest one in the world, well, Djoser was built 70 years ahead of that time. The development of new technology has allowed archaeologists to make groundbreaking discoveries, and a new, or should I say ancient pyramid in South America might win the title in dispute. It turns out that pyramids were also pretty fashionable in the Americas in the old days. Among them are the iconic pyramids of Guatemala's Tikal Temple complex, the same ones that appeared in Star Wars No. 4. But to find the oldest pyramid in the Americas, one would have to travel to Peru. Deep in the Peruvian desert, archaeologists stumbled upon a sprawling ancient metropolis known as Caral. At first, researchers believed that the settlement was pretty recent, since the site was way too complex for ancient technology to handle it. As we said, Caral is a desert town, like Las Vegas, but without all the hoopla. This means no easy access to water. And for cities like these to thrive, they need a considerable irrigation system, which leads us back to complex technologies. The Peruvians surprised us all with this new discovery. This site was huge, filled with an amphitheater, houses, and religious buildings. The whole thing probably sprawled through 370 acres. And when scientists went to test their initial hypothesis using radiocarbon dating, they found that the city probably sprung around 2027 BCE. On the site, archaeologists found 6 pyramids that could possibly predate the one in Saqqara. As far as they know, both civilizations coexisted in the same time period, in opposite parts of the world. But since researchers can't pinpoint the exact age of Caral's pyramids, it's pretty hard to guess which civilization completed their pyramid first. If only we had a crystal ball. Now, it just so happens that the shape of a pyramid is something that nature is able to produce all on its own, leaving us modern-day humans a bit confused. A classic example is the Japanese side of Yaonagani, which also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Explorers and scientists believe that Yaonagani dates back to 10,000 years ago. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yaonagani is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. To him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. Check out this triangular-shaped pool on the monument's surface. Kimura thinks it's actual proof of humans, because this triangle-shaped concave is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. As it happens with a lot of these cases, not all scientists are convinced the same. For many, Yaonagani is probably the result of thousands of years of erosion, and the fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe it is not really human-made. Sure, these huge basalt columns may look like the ruins of a palace, but they're most likely the result of the intense volcanic activity in the region. And speaking of natural formations that really look like a human made it, a pyramid on Mars has been a hot topic lately. Humans have been keenly trying to prove that there is life on Mars for quite some time. But some are stretching it really far, saying that little green or gray people built a pyramid on the planet to try and build their own civilization. This picture was taken over a decade ago by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the MRO, but it started to resurface recently. It shows what looks like a 3-sided pyramid. Some people claim that the smooth side of the pyramid could only be the effect of otherworldly work. Then science comes along and explains that Mars is home to one of the deepest canyon systems in the whole solar system. The so-called pyramid is located in what is known as the Kandor-Chasma region. This Martian region has a bunch of similar formations that are nothing more than the result of erosion. Nothing supernatural going on there, apparently. It's strange if you think about it. There are old Roman buildings that have lasted for thousands of years, while our newer buildings seem to fall apart. How did the Romans manage to create such strong buildings? A lot of them with complicated designs, too. Recent research has shown that the Romans used a type of concrete that has an extra layer of protection against the elements. It can even fix itself when it gets wet. This discovery not only explains why these buildings have lasted for thousands of years, but it can also help us make cement in a way that's more natural and resistant. A recent study shows that Romans used volcanic ash in their concrete mix to make it stronger, especially when it was near the ocean, where the air is naturally more humid and could naturally cause more damage. These days, we make concrete out of sand, rocks, water, and a special kind of cement called Portland cement. This cement itself is made by cooking limestone, clay, and other substances in very hot ovens that reach over 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. Sure, it creates a well-blended mixture, but it cracks easily, and sometimes it only lasts a few decades. There's one more interesting feature of this amazing Roman concrete. It has small white bits of calcium called lime clasts that stay inside the concrete and do not disappear over time. At first, it may not seem that attractive because it's not as smooth as the concrete we use today. And for many years, specialists used to think that having small pieces of lime in concrete was a bad thing because they thought it made buildings less resistant. But researchers found out that these tiny pieces actually help the concrete fix itself. I wish I could fix myself that easily. They discovered that when the concrete got cracks, it seemed to magically fill them with a substance called calcium carbonate found in the lime clasts. The Romans made their concrete by mixing sand, volcanic ash, and burned limestone together and adding water. This is called hot mixing. When the water and lime mix together, they have a chemical reaction that makes the mixture get very hot, up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. This also causes those tiny pieces of lime to form. Now, this concrete can get cracks, and when water, rain, or seawater gets in, it makes the calcium in the concrete dissolve. The calcium then sticks to the cracks and makes them close up, kind of like a scab. Of course, researchers had to test this method, and they made concrete as the Romans did. Shortly after, they cracked it here and there. They placed the cracked concrete underwater, and after 1 to 3 weeks, the cracks were gone. Safe to say, this didn't happen with concrete made using modern methods. Now, the Romans didn't know the science behind making their concrete strong, but they found a good recipe by trying different things over a long time period. Ancient records show that they used this recipe to build strong structures, especially for ships, and continued to use it once they found it was successful. Now, not all Roman buildings made it to the 21st century in perfect condition. The Colosseum, for instance, one of the most famous Roman constructions in the world, used to be nearly twice as large as it is today. It sustained a lot of damage throughout the ages, reaching the form we've come to know today. Let's not forget, it's a pretty old building to begin with. Its construction started in the year 70 under Roman ruler Vespasian, who later started making motor scooters named after him. You know, Vespa? Nah, I made that up. Anyway, ever since it first opened, the Colosseum was home to a lot of activities and shows, featuring fearless gladiators and a large display of exotic animals, who got to mingle and did lunch together. Unfortunately, it all went downhill in 217, when a fire struck the upper parapets and much of the building's interiors. It took a whole century to finish up the repairs for the damages. Sadly, the initial shape of the Colosseum would be gone forever. A strong earthquake followed, and that didn't help either. This one took place in southern Italy in 443. At this point, a considerable portion of the Colosseum's outer ring was damaged. Soon enough, when locals encountered hardship, they had to rely on selling chunks of limestone from the ancient Colosseum to go by. Another earthquake came in 1349, which gave the Colosseum its most devastating blow. It's when the south side of the building collapsed completely. That's when it started to look more like the building we can see today in the Italian capital. It's not all bad, though. Some pieces of stone that were shaken off the Colosseum were used to rebuild other famous landmarks in Rome. So, if we think about it, the missing part of the Colosseum isn't missing at all. It's just been recycled all around the city. One building that features pieces of old stone Colosseum is called Palazzo Venezia, and it's a local museum. Now, speaking of weird buildings, you've probably seen this one, as it's one of the most photographed spots in the world. You can see online photos of people leaning on it, or ones that make the building look like an ice cream scoop. This famous Italian landmark is called, you tell me. Yep, the Tower of Pisa, and it looks like it's seconds away from collapsing to the ground. Now, should you ever want to visit, you'll need to head over to this Italian city with the same name, Pisa, near the Square of Miracles. Now, weirdly enough, this building is more famous for its awkward incline rather than for its history or purpose. Back in 1178, when the construction of the tower was still not completed, people realized that the building was starting to lean over, and that was before they had reached its third floor. They soon figured out it had nothing to do with the building plans or the materials they used. It was all happening because of the mushy and shifting soil which was beneath the construction. These days, we know that placing a building on top of soil made of clay, fine sand, and shells isn't the best idea. But back then, people didn't know how to figure that out before building something. Now, fast forward some centuries, and it became clear that this 180-foot tower isn't just leaning, it is falling, and at a considerable rate of about 0.08 of an inch per year. Well, that may not sound like a lot, but multiply that by hundreds of years and, well, just look at the pictures and you'll understand. This leaning tower is more than 16 feet off its axis in the present day. So how come it hasn't fallen over altogether? Well, because of physics mostly. Its center of gravity continues to be located within the base of the structure, so it's pretty grounded. It's also been continuously watched over by local authorities to make sure they protect this unique building for as long as possible. The Pantheon is another great example of the way Romans understood architecture. It's also located in Rome and was initially built as a temple. The construction itself was made from concrete with different thicknesses and has an interesting shape too. Back in the day, Romans believed the Earth was like a disc, which was covered by a dome-shaped sky. So they modeled the Pantheon sticking to this idea. Light comes into the temple through a hole in the dome, shining down on the floors and walls, showing the movement of the sun. It's also one of the best preserved ancient Roman buildings. It's no wonder many other buildings have been made to look like it. In the U.S. alone, the U.S. Capitol, the Jefferson Memorial, and the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. are all said to be modeled after this ancient construction. The famous painter Michelangelo was so impressed by this building that he believed some unnatural force must have helped in its construction. The place where it stands is also very special because of the story behind it. Legend has it that the founder of Rome, Romulus, was lifted to the ancient Roman higher spirits on the wings of an eagle from this exact location. Apparently, it was a talon show. Get it? Talons? Eagles?